Hey, if you're in need of a sign and are in the Chambersburg area, you need not look any further than Baer Sign Service. They offer lighted and non-lighted signs, vehicle lettering and wraps, flags and flagpoles, and can ship anywhere. With over 75 years of being in business, Baer Sign Service is the oldest full-service sign company in Franklin County. So check them out at bearsign.com. That's BAERSIGN.com, and tell them you heard about them on Addressing Gettysburg.
This episode of Addressing Gettysburg is brought to you in part by me, audiobook narrator Mike Scott, narrator of Savis Beattie's Bloody Autumn, the Shenandoah Valley Campaign of 1864, and Unlike Anything That Ever Floated, the Monitor and Virginia and the Battle of Hampton Roads. If you are an author or publisher interested in having your titles produced as audiobooks, or even just in learning more about the process, give me a shout. You can find my contact info on my website, MikeScottVoice.com. That's MikeScottVoice.com.
From the Gettysburg Museum of History Studios, you're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Addressing Gettysburg's Ask a Gettysburg Guide. And today we are talking about Samuel Wylie Coyote Crawford. And he was a major general here at Gettysburg, commander of a famed division. But before we get to that, let's introduce our guest. Tracy Baer is a licensed battlefield guide. Hello, Tracy.
Hola.
And you've been on the show many times before.
Yeah, it's been a while, but yeah, I've been.
Yeah, it has been a while, hasn't it?
Yeah.
You know, the thing is, though, sometimes it's been a while since you've been in and recorded, but like an episode of yours from a year ago could have come out last month.
Yeah.
And that's the way it goes. But anyway, all right. So we're talking about Samuel Crawford here.
Yes.
And people love Crawford. People love the Pennsylvania Reserves. Mm-hmm. And he's got this great statue down in the Valley of Death here at Gettysburg.
Water at his feet. Has a lake named after him.
Has a lake, Lake Crawford. Good thing he didn't build anything down there.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about him prior to the war, his early life. Where he's from your neck of the woods.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why he's of interest to me. As the crow flies, he's certainly a neighbor of mine, or would have been, because his home is very near to where I currently live. Okay. Still stands.
Is it marked at all, or?
It is privately owned. Mm-hmm. And I have spoken with the current owner a couple of times, and he has allowed me to take some tours back to the home. It's back a dirt driveway. It's, again, privately owned, so if you know where it is, please don't just go back there.
Right, and don't share it in the comments.
Right. And it's very difficult to see from the road simply because it's down in a little bit of a ravine. And especially in the summer, if there's corn in the fields, all you can see is the very top of it, very top of the roof. But I was delighted to hear that the current owner, when I spoke with him, said that he's very much into restoration and trying to preserve what it looked like, which can be a very long, drawn-out, tedious, and expensive proposition.
Sure. How do you figure that out? I mean, especially if, like, Crawford's people weren't like, well, someday our son is going to be a famous general, so this is what we had in this room.
Yeah,
this is,
I don't know, unless you have descendants who may have had some of the furniture handed down. Photographs.
Photographs, of course.
Photographs. And, of course, have you had Kendra?
Yeah.
Devaney?
Yeah,
I mean, that's what she does. She does this research to figure it out. So she would have been a great resource.
Well, I guess you could do like typical for the time, right? Like you can... Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to get it specifically the way, like Nancy Goodmistad down at the Shriver house. She doesn't know how the Shrivers had the house, but it's a typical home for mid-19th century.
Unless you can get, some expert in preservation in to strip the layers and find a color of a wall or a wallpaper or, woodwork and trim. Very difficult, I would think.
I'm sure there's millions of ways to do it, right?
Yeah.
There's more than one way to skin a cat, and there's more than one way to restore a house.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the old saying.
I've not done the former, but I've done much of the latter.
Right. You have not skinned a cat. Good. I'm glad you haven't done that. All right. So he grows up in this area, Chambersburg.
Yeah. So let's take a step back and introduce his parents.
Go ahead.
His father, Samuel Wylie Crawford Sr., was born in Charleston, South Carolina, 1793.
Okay.
And he lived a full life. He didn't die until 1879.
Wow.
So he was
man.
Yeah. So he and his sister born in Charleston. And one of the big things that claimed lives in the South, in the Charleston area, was yellow fever, malaria. Both his parents died of yellow fever when he was very young, when he and his sister were very young. And I don't know if it was a formal adoption or not, but an aunt and uncle would take those siblings, bring them to Philadelphia, where they lived, and raise them in Philly. So he would spend as much time in Philly growing up in his education as anything. Senior would attend the University of Pennsylvania in Philly, where he would graduate with a degree in theology, and he would become a minister. He traveled to New York City, where he would meet young Jane Agnew, who was born in New York City in 1797, so just a few years younger, and those two would be wed.
Okay.
And Samuel Wylie Crawford Sr. then would accept a position as a pastor in Franklin County. So he actually had several parishes. He had a parish in Waynesboro, Greencastle, Scotland, and Fayetteville.
Okay.
So he had at least 4 parishes.
Around.
Yeah.
What was the denomination?
Presbyterian. Well, I think that's what it was.
Oh, okay.
His son is going to be a Presbyterian minister.
So you assume that he followed.
Yeah, possibly incorrectly. So I'm not 100% sure on that.
Okay.
But when they would move, they needed to move to Franklin County to be nearer to these 4 congregations. And they found this pre-existing farm in Fayetteville, just to the north side of Fayetteville. And I don't know how big it was. It's really been subdivided and cut up. And the house still remains, as we mentioned. So they would purchase that. By this time, they've already had 2 children. John Agnew Crawford is the oldest, and John Agnew was born in 1822, and then the first daughter, Margaret Wylie Crawford. Wylie being, traditionally you pick up a name of family, and
is that no? It wasn't the mother's maiden name.
It was the father's middle name, and I don't know if it was an ancestral name or not.
Okay.
John Agnew, the first son, Agnew being the mom's maiden name, Jane Agnew.
Right.
Okay. So that was 1823, and he accepted this position in that same year, 1823, and they bought this farm, this home, and they called it Crawford John. And then it would only be a year later, sometime in 1824, that home caught on fire. No one hurt, no one home. I don't know, a cow kicked a lantern, something like that. But the house was largely destroyed by fire. So they rebuilt. And that's the house we have today. I furnished you the photo of.
Let me get that one there. Okay, keep going.
So they rebuilt, and they named the new home Allendale, and it was after his ancestral home in Scotland.
Wait, hold on. I just got the wrong picture here. There we go. Allendale is coming up right now.
There it is.
There it is.
That's a picture of it. And there's a few photos I've seen. One of them looks like it was painted at one time. So they must have done some sandblasting or something to chemically remove the paint. But largely how it appeared, certainly some modern updates to it.
But your typical, it's like federal style, right? Is that federal style or is that...
Sure. But, interestingly, I remember many years ago when the house was in disrepair. It wasn't inhabited, but it was used as a haunted house.
Oh.
At Halloween,
of course
somebody would go in and fix it up scary-like and take tours through it.
Naturally.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's what you do with an old house.
With an old farmhouse. Yeah.
Sitting here doing nothing.
Already
let's make it
has
haunted.
the broken banister and the cobwebs. Why not use it for a haunted house?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So then somewhere, someone along the line purchased it and started to renovate and fix it up.
Now, his father is a minister. That's how they're mainly making the money, or at the farm too, or...
Well, I don't know. Well, he's not a farmer. I'm
Okay.
sure they had a hired help to help around the farm for sure. He also supplemented his income as a teacher at the Chambersburg Academy.
Oh, okay.
Which that stood on the corner of 3rd and Queen Street in Chambersburg. There's still a school there. Actually, that land was deeded by Benjamin Chambers for the specific purpose of education. And
So it's always been a school.
Yeah. So that original building, the academy, was destroyed by the fire at McCausland's raid in 1864, but it was rebuilt, and it became the senior high school in Chambersburg. My grandmother and my mother both went there, and then when the new high school was built, that reverted to a junior high. So I went there.
Okay.
And junior high. But it's recently changed hands, and it's part of it's now luxury loft apartments. But there's also put aside a section for education.
Oh, okay.
Stay in that.
So it's staying what it's supposed to be.
So Crawford Sr. would have worked there somewhat. And then 1825, Anne Stavely Crawford is born, and she's the first child born at Allendale. And then 2 years later, November 8th, 1827, Samuel Wylie Crawford Jr. is born at Allendale. So he's born there, first male, second child born there, and mostly raised there until they moved back to Philly.
So what brings his father out here to Franklin County?
Those congregations.
The congregations,
the
okay.
4 churches that he was,
Okay.
Yeah. So he's serving those 4 churches. Alex McLeod was born in 1829. Cornelius Nathan was born in 1831. He passed away in 1840. 1831, Senior accepted a position at his alma mater, University of Pennsylvania. So he would pick up the family and move back to Philadelphia, retaining this property. And this would be kind of a summer home, a vacation home that they would come back to. And they would utilize the railroad from Philadelphia to Harrisburg, Cumberland Valley Railroad down the valley to Chambersburg, and then take a buggy out to Allendale, 10 miles or whatever it is, 8 miles, 10 miles.
Yeah.
So it was frequently visited and stayed at for extended periods by the family.
I wonder, so what would you, while they're not there, is somebody operating the farm or something?
They'll have somebody there, an overseer of some type to stay there and take care of the inside and the outside of the property.
Yeah. Because I'm thinking too, you get a buggy, you can rent a buggy, but then you got to get around while you're out there. You can't get to rent a buggy the whole time.
And they would have animals, so they're going to have someone taking care of them.
That's why I'm asking, because otherwise the animals are going to die.
Right.
You can't leave them there. Yeah. Unless you're taking them with you on the train, which I guess you could have done.
Well, I guess they could have.
Yeah. But still. So it's just interesting how they.
That was 1831. And a final child to Samuel Sr. and his wife Jane was born in 1833. Her name was Jane Elizabeth, but she passed away very soon. So I don't know if it was childbirth, she died, or what, but total of 7, with only really 5 of them surviving. Yeah. So the eldest son, John Agnew, that we have a photo of as well.
We do. Brother John, we call it.
This is in an era when it was
handsome,
expected.
Yeah, he's a handsome fellow. Yeah, very
serious
happy.
Looking, isn't he?
Yes.
Yeah. So this was in an era when it was expected that your son would probably go into the same vocation as the father.
Right.
John Agnew would, because he had an in at UP, so he went to University of Pennsylvania as well, and he graduated in 1841, again following his father's footsteps in theology. and he became a minister, a Presbyterian minister. And interestingly, a little bit of trivia, and you may have heard this, he would serve with the United States Christian Commission during the Civil War as a delegate for a brief period of time. So he was one of 3 Crawfords.
Okay.
At Gettysburg. He served
I didn't hear that.
Caring for the 5th Corps. So it is likely that there were 3 Crawfords at Little Round Top.
Huh.
As Alex McLeod would not sit out the war, he would become an officer, lieutenant, serving on his older brother's
Interesting.
staff.
And then also in the same area again, the 20th Maine, you got 3 Chamberlains, right?
Yep,
and one
right.
of them's with the Christian Commission.
That is right.
Yeah.
And his name was John as well.
I was just going to say, another John in the Christian
And
Commission.
who was the third officer that I'm aware of that had a brother on his staff and another brother serving with the Christian Commission?
Oh, I don't know. Who?
Were you close?
Oliver Howard?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know.
O. Howard. Yeah. So there were at least 3. There may have been more.
So I knew he had the brother on the staff. I didn't know he had a brother in the Christian Commission.
I believe I'm correct with that.
That makes sense, though.
Yeah. It would with him.
Yeah. For sure with him.
John Agnew actually, post-war, would reside in Chambersburg, and he became the pastor of the Presbyterian Church of the Falling Spring, of which I am a member. My wife grew up in that church, and it was during, and I believe he served about 10 years, and that's where that image comes from. That hangs in the north axe of the
this
chapel.
Picture?
Yeah.
Okay.
That hangs in the north axe of the chapel of the Presbyterian Church of Falling Spring in Chambersburg, and it was during his tenure that chapel was constructed.
Right.
I believe it was from about 67 on for about 10 years that he served there.
Okay.
And and if you go into that chapel, on either side of the pulpit are beautiful stained glass windows dedicated to his parents.
Really?
Yeah, beautiful. And they have names on them in stained glass.
Interesting. So for those of you who are listening to this but not and you're wondering, well, what are these pictures they're talking about? And so this episode is available on YouTube as well, so you can go and see it.
Yeah. So anyway, to finish with John Agnew Crawford, when he passed, he was buried in the graveyard right behind the chapel. A prominent stone on the path that wanders back to the Benjamin Chambers family plot. So, brief on John Agnew. And of course, when Samuel began to grow and get older, then it was expected he too would follow into the ministry. And he had, I don't know from how early on, but he had other ideas. Yeah. And, I think you mentioned this in another episode somewhere down the road. Samuel Wylie Crawford graduated from, I don't know if you'd call it primary school, high school, whatever back then, but he finished that primary education and he entered the University of Pennsylvania at the age of 15.
Wow. Yeah, I don't know if I mentioned that on a show.
I heard
Somebody
that
might have.
somewhere along. How in the world are you mature enough to do that?
But yeah, that's. I remember I read a book about Thomas Jefferson, and when he was, I don't know, maybe a little younger than that, his father gave him a knife and a musket and said, "Go off into the woods and figure it out." It was a different day and age. You'd raised your children to be adults as quickly as possible.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, Junior would enter, again, 1842 at the age of 15. And by 1847, he had completed his undergraduate studies. He had passed a literacy test that allowed him to attend Penn's Medical School. So, by that age, he had already decided, I really don't want to follow my father's footsteps into the ministry. And I'm sure that would make for some interesting and possibly heated discussions around the dinner table, But I guess Junior was convincing.
Yeah.
I'm still serving people. I'm still serving the Lord by taking care of people.
Right. Yeah.
So he successfully negotiated medical school, and by all accounts, he was very inquisitive, very intelligent, and he just really wanted to learn. And he spent a lot of time not partying with the fraternities, but rather studying on his own.
Doing what you're supposed to do.
Doing what you're supposed to do, and I joke, if I would have studied in college the way I studied in preparation for the guide exam, I'd have made Dean's List every semester.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny, like age is something now, it seems, where you finally want an education.
Yeah.
But a true education. I think college is more like training now. Like they just train you to get a job. And
point you in a general direction.
Yeah. But I think there was a point where it was a true education. You were well-rounded. You had to know the classics and things.
Oh, yeah.
And I think now people become interested in that stuff after 35. And I think it's a lot of times it has to do, I think it's just a natural part of growing up.
Sure.
But for other people, I think it might happen sooner. Like for me, it happened, I don't know, probably I've always wanted to teach myself, but really when I hit 40, I was like, I want to understand.
Yeah.
Not know, I want to understand. And that's when it changed for me. But I also, like a lot of the people I know became more interested in self-education when they had kids. Mm-hmm. And they would spend their day going to work, and they come home, and then it's the kids, and the kids go to bed, and it's now like, all right, what about me? And oh, I used to be interested in this. Maybe I'll look up podcasts, or I'll read some books again. Yeah, and so I think it is funny because I say the same thing. If I studied just an eighth of how much I study now when I was in college, I could have been great. But
you could have been great.
I could have been. I could have been a contender.
Could have been.
I just didn't care.
You just didn't care.
I do now, though.
Well, but Samuel really seems to have cared. And he, not only his studies, his formal studies, he developed a very strong ability to draw and illustrate. And that would help him in future years with some publications in Harper's Weekly and other places. But I have seen a few of his illustrations, and they're remarkable.
Really?
Yeah, they're really detailed. Really, proportions in architecture are just spot on.
Really?
Really good. Really good. In addition to that, he would really take an interest in, and keep in mind, while he is in college, this is during the time of the Mexican War.
Okay.
So he's staying up on current events, political events.
Right.
And this is of interest to him. And then certainly between wars, he still stayed up on political events. It was just fascinating. And he seemed to, at times, perhaps, and maybe I'm reading something into it that's not accurate, but he seems to really maybe have spent a lot of time dissecting to understand, perhaps longer than he should. And, that could come back to bite you in the butt when you're on the field of battle and you're given an order.
Right. You think too long.
You
Analysis
overthink something.
Paralysis.
Yeah, you overthink something, and perhaps that may have influenced him later on. I'm not saying it did. Again, I'm not sure if that's how he was. It's just kind of what I'm reading into it.
Yeah.
He did successfully defend his thesis, and upon graduation, he was Doctor of Medicine from University of Pennsylvania. Again, probably spending a little bit of time with family after that graduation. And again, possibly some more interesting discussions around the dinner table, because it wasn't long after graduation from UP in 1850 that he decided to go to New York City and sit for the Army Medical Board exams. So upon doing that, he successfully did that. And he did, I did want to mention, he did finish top of his class at Penn for the medical boards. March 10th, 1851, he received a commission as assistant surgeon with the rank of captain of cavalry. So he clearly, somewhere along the line, was influenced that I'm not going to go into private practice. I'm going to go into the Army and serve that way. So what that influence was, I don't know, since he didn't have a strong military, or really any in his military background in his immediate family. My dad didn't serve. My older brother, who was a very important mentor to him, didn't serve. But somewhere along the line, he decided to. So he is now in the Army, and his first orders were to report to Texas. So Philadelphia, the mountains of Pennsylvania, very seasonal, Right. Now he's in Texas.
Texas, yeah.
He's in Texas.
Quite a jump.
It is. And he was assigned to the 8th U.S. Infantry, and he cared for roughly 150, 160 soldiers. But he was very much taking advantage of peacetime Army and being able to do things that he otherwise wouldn't during wartime, such as travel and research and things like that. And that was his desire to learn and understand. He would secure permission to travel to Mexico in 1856. He arrived in Mexico City in October, and he was assigned to embassy duty, where he, again, his not formal political training, but keeping up on those current events allowed him to learn enough that he helped with negotiating some treaties. His studies and interest in those political issues were paying off for him. But he also had that desire to continue to learn. And he must have been, and I can again make an assumption, which can be dangerous, that his time in Franklin County, in the nature in a rural area, he often would write in later years of really missing the mountains of Pennsylvania. And Allendale's not too far from the western side of South Mountain, not too far from Caledonia, where he, I'm sure, spent considerable time in his youth.
Sure.
He, and again, this must have given him some sense of, appreciation for the environment, for nature.
Yeah.
And he was able to accompany an expedition to the summit of a Mexican volcano that I am not even going to try to pronounce for you. Okay? Here, names. You do it.
Where?
It is. Where is it?
To Washington, Fort Adams, Rhode Island, Sherman. Where are we here? Oh, here. Okay, let's
begins
try
with
it.
A P.
It begins with a P. Popocatépetl?
Okay, let's go with that.
Popocatépetl. Popocatépetl. I'm going to say it's Popocatépetl.
Pop. We'll call it volcano.
Mount Pop.
Mount Pop.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or Ketty.
So there was an expedition, which means there's a large number of people. Right. Your guides, your Sherpas. I don't know. Whatever's taking
whatever you have there.
Your equipment, right?
Right.
And it must have been, evidently it was pretty high, because he talks about being above tree line. Of course, the air is getting thinner, and not everyone in the expedition made it, but he did. And he was actually lowered into the crater, where he gathered samples and specimens that were turned over to the Mexican authorities. And some of this information made its way back to the Smithsonian, along with illustrations and writings, and the Smithsonian would end up publishing some of this information that was acquired by then Dr. Crawford.
Right.
Following his time in Mexico, 1858, he accompanied William Tecumseh Sherman on an expedition up the Red River in Texas, eventually Crawford would end up in Kansas, and this would be shortly after the John Brown Potawatomi.
You can say
another
that
big
word.
P word. Yeah. Potawatomi Creek, and that was 1856. So it's a few years after that. In 1860, he received, I guess, what would amount to a furlough. He returned to Allendale in Franklin County for a period of time to and this was one of those times where he talked about recharging just rest and recharge.
Now, with the Potawatomi Creek, were they sent up there to respond to what was going on, or just happened to be in the area?
I assume there would have been an Army station or camp there somewhere that he would make his way to. Whether he had any period of assignment there, I don't know, because he wasn't there long.
Right.
He came home to Allendale for a while, and then he was assigned to Fort Adams. Fort Adams is in Rhode Island, I want to say.
I think that's what it said on the paper you just handed me.
Oh.
I think I saw Rhode Island there somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay, we'll go with that. But he wouldn't be there for very long at Fort Adams. He received a telegram that would essentially change the course of his life.
Okay.
Telegram simply stated, you need to report for duty at Fort Moultrie and the Charleston defenses.
Oh, no.
Okay?
Okay.
So he arrived at Charleston September 8th, 1860. And keep in mind, this is where his father was born.
Yeah.
So he's returning.
So he's going to his family
and
roots.
His father's still alive, so he knows he's going there. But what ties his father had anymore were probably slim to none, being taken away at such a young age. And the reason he was sent there, he was replacing Fort Moultrie's surgeon, who he himself contracted yellow fever and died. The same thing as his grandparents.
Okay.
So what am I getting into going to Charleston? I know at least 3 people who died from the same thing.
Yeah.
And it won't be long till he's serving there that Junior actually contracts malaria. So, and that's something that's going to recur throughout his life as well. Crawford, again, this is going to be at a time in the nation's history that becomes pretty volatile. We're talking 1860, end of 1860. Who's been elected?
Abraham Lincoln.
Abraham Lincoln. Now, he doesn't take office until, February, March?
I think it's March,
61. So who's president now?
Buchanan.
Buchanan is from Mercersburg.
South? Is he from
Franklin County? So
from here?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's from Mercersburg. He was born at a little trading, what do I want to say? A little trading, all I can think of is depot, and that's not a little whatever.
Yeah.
Called Stony Batter. So, today we can go from Crawford's home in Allendale to Buchanan's home in Mercersburg in 20, 30 minutes.
Yeah. No, I think I did know that. What's funny is how the brain works. So I know Buchanan was kind of allowing things to fester that led to the Civil War. So for some reason in my head, I assumed he was from the South. And then you said Mercersburg, and for whatever reason, Johnny Mercer came into my head, and so I think, oh, he's from Savannah. And then you said from here, and I'm like, wait, that kind of sounds familiar. And then now that you're describing the area, I think I've seen a sign.
Trading post.
That was tough. Is there a sign on 30 going out that way?
On
I
30?
I swear I've seen a
30
sign.
30 doesn't go through Mercersburg, but there probably is out around Fort Loudon, maybe.
Fort Loudon, yeah. That's where I'm picturing in my head.
Yeah, because Mercersburg is south of 30 along the mountain.
Right, so you would get off of 30 to go down there. Would there be a sign that says James Buchanan birthplace or something like that? Or?
I can't picture one there. There very well could be.
Yeah.
There's certainly one in Greencastle pointing out 16 to the west.
Maybe then that's what I saw. I don't know. Yeah. I have very vague images in my head of all this area here. Okay.
So, I'm sure Crawford is... His writings indicate that he's still really keeping in touch with political atmosphere while he's in Charleston.
Right.
And he knows where Buchanan's from, so I don't know if those two ever met or not. I don't know. But I'm sure he's aware, that he's from Franklin County. And it's interesting because Crawford writes... And incidentally, he wrote a book. He published a book, 1886, 1867, I want to say.
Okay.
I'll have to look. Called The Genesis of the Civil War, Fort Sumter, 1860 to 61. So it's his experience in Charleston.
Okay.
And at Moultrie and Sumter. And he speaks of attending the secessionist meetings and hearings in Charleston. So imagine, being a fly on the wall.
Right.
Here's this unionist. Clearly, his father was an abolitionist.
Right.
He's attending this, and he's probably sharing this information with the officers at Moultrie, and the first officer in Moultrie, I can't remember his name, before Colonel John Gardner. He wasn't held in the highest confidence. He was replaced, and this is in December. November 15th, 1860. Robert Anderson, who we all have become familiar with,
Sure,
takes over the assignment at Fort Moultrie, and oh my God, the pressure on that man.
Yeah, really.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
I can't imagine that.
No, it's got to be scary.
The decisions he has to, and he's a major.
Yeah, right.
But Crawford is sharing information, I'm sure, with, about the condition of Moultrie, as all the officers are. And when Anderson arrives, he understands Moultrie's really not an enclosed fortification. It's open, and there are free to go civilians in and out. And who's a spy, who's not, right? And eventually Washington will send word and orders to Anderson, feel free to move your very small garrison, 40, 45 men, whatever it was, to the facility that you feel the most safe and secure in.
Okay.
Because he certainly didn't have enough to man all of the defenses in the harbor.
Right.
And eventually he chose Sumter. The Ordinance of Secession by South Carolina was passed on December 20th, 1860. And Crawford attended that vote, that meeting. And He was in his officer's uniform. Okay.
Yeah, it must have gone over well.
Let me tell you a personal experience where I felt uncomfortable. Okay? And it was not nearly as significant as this. Mm-hmm. Years ago, I don't know if you're familiar with Scotland School of Veterans Children or not. Scotland, Pennsylvania, no longer operates. But back in the probably early 90s, one of the administrators there asked my father and myself to accompany a quarterback from Scotland School who was being recruited by the University of West Virginia in Morgantown.
Okay.
And my father-in-law was a diehard Mountaineer fan. And I'm not. I'm blue and white. I'm Penn State. And it just so happened, he gave us these tickets and we escorted this young quarterback to Morgantown to meet with the coaches and the players before the game, after the game. And as fate would have it, they were playing Penn State that day. So, of course, I've got my hat and my sweatshirt.
Yeah.
And Penn State, more or less took it to them.
Yeah.
And I thought, holy shit, we have to go to the West Virginia locker room. Take this guy in there. So I take my hat off, turn my sweatshirt inside out, and I'm in the locker room with these guys that are a full foot taller than me and 150 pounds heavier than me. And I'm like, here's Crawford at a secessionist meeting in his full military uniform thinking, okay, am I going to get out of here?
I mean, I would be hoping that maybe some people would think I could be converted yet. Because there were because there were still guys in the service, the U.S. service, who would eventually leave. So, maybe they're thinking, well, maybe this guy can come over to our side. But
that could be. He doesn't mention being recruited.
At least that would make it easy for me to go in there.
Yeah,
is if I just delude myself into thinking that's the case.
There you go.
But it's a delusion, I'm sure.
There you go. Well, he certainly overheard plans that would some be true and some not be true. Christmas night of 60, so that would have been December 25th of 60, he actually informed Major Anderson that he had overheard possible plans for someone to come and take Moultrie. Mm-hmm. And this helped sway Anderson into deciding, well, maybe this isn't the safest place to be. And it's my understanding Anderson on his own kept the plans to himself so nothing would leak out and ruin the plans to move to Sumter.
Smart.
But certainly, ultimately, that's where they're going to end up. And that was the evening of the 26th.
I wonder, and I don't know if we know this, but was there anyone in Anderson's garrison who might have had Southern sympathies and when the war really came about, resigned and went over to the South?
That I'm not certain of. I read a couple of books on Sumter, and I just got another one, but it's been too long ago to remember the details.
Yeah.
It sticks in my mind. It wasn't just his small garrison. There were certainly some families with him, some wives with the officers.
Yeah.
But there was also work crews, local work crews.
So civilians and what would you say? It was about 45 men in the garrison?
40, 45, in that neighborhood somewhere. That would have been U.S. Army.
Right.
So they moved to Sumter the evening of the 26th of December. And, of course, Crawford being the hospital surgeon, the doctor for the garrison, he was required to pack up as much of his hospital gear and move that across the bay as he could. Whatever could not be taken, hospital provisions, ammunition, whatever, they tried to destroy. Spiking guns, dumping out the powder in the bay, whatever. They certainly didn't want to leave it.
Yeah, sure.
To be used against them.
No, of course not.
So they end up at Sumter, and the work crews were continuing, the garrison and the civilians were continuing to try to mount guns at Sumter, trying to brick up any of the openings, the embrasures, is that what they're called? The openings in the wall that could not be utilized. So they're continuing to work at Sumter. And eventually, the families, the political climate got to be so heated that it was seen to be prudent to allow the families to leave.
Yeah.
And probably some of the work crews as well. In addition to the hospital duties, the surgeon duties, Crawford undertook the responsibility of being the commissary officer. So he's,
wearing two hats.
Taking stock of the provisions. So they were probably getting mad at him as much as anybody when rations turned into rationing rations.
Right.
Eventually, there were some letters home, from South Carolina that, again, talked about him missing Allendale, missing Franklin County, missing the mountain air. Again, contracted malaria. This really affected his duties. And in fact, I mentioned to you earlier, if you can pull up the image of the officer corps of Sumter, I mentioned to you how Sam himself disliked that image because he was clearly suffering with a recurrence of his malaria when that was taken, and he just did not look very good.
That's it right here.
And of course, he is.
So who have we got? We've got Anderson right there.
Yes, to his right.
And then we've got...
That is Crawford.
Crawford to his right. So Anderson, I'm sorry, I thought everybody could see the mouse. Anderson is the guy left center. Crawford is right center. All the way to the left, seated. We're talking in the seated row here. Mm-hmm. All the way to the left is Abnu Doubleday.
Yeah.
And I was saying before, I don't believe I've seen any other picture of him except for the famous one, where he's standing and he's got his, as someone called it in the comments section on another show, the Princess Leia hairdo.
Princess Leia. That's a good one.
but it's interesting. And who's the guy right in the middle, behind Anderson and Crawford?
So I'm not sure.
Okay.
Truman Seymour is one of these men, and I think Truman Seymour is clear over back row left, but that could be him in the center back row too. I'm not 100% sure.
I'm going to just real quickly here blow this up so that everybody can see better. There we go. So yeah, the guy I'm talking about is standing right in the middle. He looks
pretty serious, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. I wouldn't want to mess with this guy. And then the guy on the far right,
he's a little blurred.
He looks like a cardboard cutout.
He kind of does,
right? He's a different. Everything about him is actually him and the guy seated in front of him look like they're kind of pasted in.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird.
But this is the full officer corps of Sumter.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's a pretty well-known photograph. And the guy in the back row, second from the left, he's got those eyes that follow you around the room.
Yeah, very intense. Wow. God.
But yeah, this is one that Crawford did not care for. And he was a captain, as was Doubleday. Anderson was a major, so Crawford was really third in command at Sumter by seniority. Outranking any other captains that may have been there.
Right, and he, okay, we didn't get to the battle yet, so I don't want to give it away.
What?
Well, the battle. The Battle of Fort Sumter.
Oh, did something happen there? Okay. So, all right, well, let's pick that up. Because as time goes by, the U.S. government would attempt to resupply Fort Sumter.
Right.
The Star of the East, the Star of the West, which was it? The Star of the...
I don't know.
A ship was sent, and it was fired upon.
Right.
By the Confederates, turned away.
And it was the Star of the West, the one with Custer? Wait, let me see if I have it in my... I'll look into it.
Okay, let me see if I have it in my notes.
I don't know. Maybe somebody in the comment section would know the answer to this one here. Fort Sumter.
I should know that. I mean, that's one of those things. Go with your gut instinct, right?
Right. And what does your gut say?
Star of the.
I
know it wasn't north or south.
Well, let's see. What?
I think it was the Star of the West.
The name of the ship that resupplied. Supplied Fort Sumter. What do you say?
I thought it was west.
You, sir, are correct.
Okay.
Yes, Star of the West.
Okay.
Okay.
So anyway, that ship carrying not just food and other provisions, but personnel as well, was shot upon and turned away. So things really got heated. Things really got serious. You know, they got real.
Mm-hmm. They got real.
They got real. And negotiations obviously broke down. Lincoln is now formally in the office of president.
Right.
And other states have already seceded from the Union. The Confederate, especially the state of South Carolina, claimed possession of all of these forts. And they were insulted and offended and viewed it as being an act of war that Anderson moved his men there. So we arrive at April 12th, 1861, about 1 a.m. Again, times, who knows?
Civil War time.
So this small boat arrives at the Sumter Pier, goes through the Sally Port. The men are carrying a message from PGT Beauregard, who's in command of the South Carolina defenses and all the other forts. Okay, the fort wouldn't be fired upon if a date would be given for its evacuation and the fort's guns would not be used. And of course, you can look up the name of the Star of the West in 12 seconds, but back then,
right,
it takes time to relay these, to consider the next move, and then allow those messages to go back, find Beauregard, allow them to rehash what's going on, consider, respond. So, this takes time.
Sure.
It's a tremendous amount of pressure on Anderson. While Anderson is contemplating this, he brings his officer corps aside. It turns into a 3-hour meeting. Senior officers, including Crawford, agreed that they would leave on the 15th. Okay, so this is the 12th. They agreed they would leave on the 15th unless fired upon, or they would receive orders from the contrary from Washington. And I think somewhere along the line, Anderson said, why don't you just wait a couple of days? We're going to be out of food anyway, All right. So the Union garrison, Anderson would have given this information to these aides, these couriers, to take back to Beauregard. And now you have to wait. You have to wait for Beauregard's response. So the Confederate aides, some of them are still waiting at the fort. And one of those individuals was a Confederate that would rise as an officer. His name was Roger Pryor. Uh-huh. And they are just waiting in the hospital at the fort. And, passing time. They're not playing on their phones. They're just, what do we have to do?
The Civil War equivalent to playing on your phone.
Yeah, whatever that be. Was. Well, apparently it was, hey, I see a bottle of brandy or whiskey. So Roger Pryor helps himself, and by now it's what, 2? No, it would have been closer to 3 in the morning, whatever. That's a little early to be taking a nip. But he just, and I don't know if the sea air had gotten to him or what, he couldn't smell the difference. But when he had taken this, evidently a large swig of what he assumed was medicinal alcohol, Sergeant Crawford said, that's not, I don't think that's what you think. I think you think it is, or whatever. It ended up, he had swallowed a pretty good amount of medicinal potassium. Oh. I didn't look it up. I don't know. But Crawford said, that's enough to poison you.
Oh, boy.
So we got time. Hop right up here on this table and I'll pump your stomach. So Crawford evidently became one of the first, if not the first, Union surgeon to
pump a stomach,
to help to render aid to a Confederate.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And that didn't go unnoticed because Doubleday would start poking fun at Crawford, who I don't know how much of a sense of humor Crawford had. Uh-huh. He had some, but Doubleday said, you can be arrested for aiding the enemy.
Yeah.
That. But Crawford wasn't to be outdone. And he said, well, I could not allow him to remove U.S. government property from this history. So
that's a good answer.
A little bit of levity at a very tense time, right?
I like that. That's a good answer.
Yeah. So, it became not acceptable to Beauregard. So that small launch would return with the Confederates in, and of course about, what was it, 4:30? I have written here 4:37. Who knows? The first shots came from Johnson's Island at Fort Sumter. Uh-huh. During the lead up, I should say, Crawford actually became versed by Doubleday and Truman Seymour on loading, aiming, firing artillery. And of course, at this point early on, there's no casualties, and the Union response didn't come until 7 o'clock or after they began firing the fort's guns in response to the Confederates.
Oh, that's interesting. So for what, like 2.5 hours or so, they're just taking fire.
They're taking it.
Wow.
And, as the story goes, Doubleday aimed and fired the first cannon.
Right.
Somewhere along the line, Crawford took his turn commanding a battery and aiming and firing some of the guns.
I guess when you have such a small contingent of men, everybody's a combatant in that situation.
Yeah. And, there's stories about if you weren't manning the guns, you were sewing flannel bags to put powder in.
Right. You're doing something.
Everybody's doing something, right?
Right.
So finally, there were some minor injuries, shrapnel, flying brick, whatever. Crawford had to man the hospital and treat some soldiers. So he's not only treating, some of the first Union casualties, as well as prior, the Confederate casualty. And then eventually, after 36 hours, Anderson said, okay, enough's enough. Yeah, we're running out of ammunition. We're already practically out of food. I need to spare this garrison.
Yeah.
And he made the decision to surrender the fort with the acknowledgement that he would be able to lower the garrison flag and take it with him and fire a 100-gun salute in the honor of the flag and I'm sure, of the nation.
So, and then they were able to just hop on a boat and go north, or
essentially,
yeah.
But during this 100-gun salute, about midway through, the only U.S. soldier to die when either a premature explosion loading or a cannon exploded or something, Private Daniel Huff, Houghh, he was killed. Accidental shell explosion. Okay? Others were wounded, but he was the first death. And of course, Crawford had to treat those wounded, and he had to prepare that body to be returned to the North to be interred.
Right.
So, a couple of firsts there by.
But what a fascinating story, though, because for Gettysburg people, because of Doubleday and Crawford.
Yeah,
they're both there. Mm-hmm. Anybody else?
Yeah, Norman Hall.
Hall is there as well.
Norman Hall is there as well, and he is lieutenant, possibly.
Okay.
So was he one of those photos? I don't know.
I don't know. He could have been.
Yeah, we can look at that later.
Yeah, we could check it out.
And of course, Anderson would retain that flag throughout the war, and they would go back. We can talk about that later, if I remember. But they would go back for a ceremony to re-raise that flag at Sumter.
Yeah.
May 1961, Crawford is promoted to major, and he begins to. He didn't attend the United States Military Academy at West Point, any other formal military training. So we all know what kind of grief these non-military personnel can receive.
Sure.
And many people would claim he was just happened to be in the right place at the right time, rose to notoriety. I would contend that my personal opinion is, was he an outstanding officer? No. Was he an above average officer? I believe so, because it didn't take much in the Army of the Potomac to be cashiered. And he stayed throughout the entire war.
Could it have been that this war is beginning and he just was under fire in Fort Sumter. He performed well. They're going to have to get guys who've seen the elephant, so to speak, to lead men. So put him up as a major. And
how many times have we seen that happen? Okay, let's get so-and-so from the War of 1812. Let's get so-and-so from the Mexican War.
Right.
And it doesn't pan out for him.
Yeah.
But apparently Crawford showed something, because he remained in, pretty significant command throughout. Yeah. He's going to rise. Fall of 1961, he was assigned to Camp Gawley in Western Virginia, where he became an inspector general for William Rosecrans. So he's, for whatever reason, making some ties there, connections. Saw a little bit of action, not a great deal, between Robert Schenck and John Floyd in Western Virginia. But he's really going to start seeing more significant action and rising a little bit more in rank in 1862 in the Valley Campaign.
Now, is he actually, with Rosecrans, is he actually seeing action, or was he around when action was happening? Because he's not in a combat position yet, right?
After Fort Sumter, for whatever reason, he decided to ask for a transfer from medical to the infantry, and he received that.
Right.
So now he's not in a medical capacity at Rosecrans.
No, but did you say he was
the Inspector General.
Yeah.
So he didn't see combat front line, but he certainly
But he was around.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
He was aware of what was going on.
He's not leading men as a major just yet.
Not yet.
All right. Okay.
Not yet. 1862 Valley Campaign. He actually received another assignment, this time to the army led by General Nathaniel Banks in the Shenandoah Valley. And, of course, Banks not militarily trained either. He is promoted, Crawford is promoted to Brigadier General effective April 25th, 1862. So clearly, I mean, whether it's because we need officers or we see something in you, I don't know, but he's rising.
Right.
And he's assigned to the command of the 1st Brigade of the 1st Division of the 2nd Corps. So the 2nd Corps is Banks. This is Pope's army. Okay. The 2nd Corps is Banks. The 1st Division is another Gettysburg name, Alpheus Williams.
Mm-hmm. We know him.
Mm-hmm. And 1st Brigade is Crawford. And in his 1st Brigade, see, I already have my 9-point star, so I don't have to remember orders of battle like this. But in his brigade was the 5th Connecticut, the 10th Maine, 28th New York, 46th Pennsylvania, and part of Knapp's Battery.
Okay.
So some familiar names there.
Yeah.
And it was at this point where his younger brother, Lieutenant Alex McLeod Crawford, joins his staff as an aide-de-camp.
Okay.
So now we have the two Crawfords together. And I think, I don't know this for a fact, but I think it's probably common if you have a young brother, you want to kind of take him under your wing and protect him.
Sure.
Yeah. So you're on my staff.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's the privileges of rank, too, that you can pull him in.
Absolutely.
Now, do we know John, the Christian Commission one? Where's he at this point?
I don't believe he's in the Christian Commission delegates, it's my understanding, would serve for a period of about 6 weeks at a time.
Okay.
And you would take notes and send them back to the commission that would review that and see what the actions are, possibly what needs to be changed. So I don't know when he actually started, but I know he was around Gettysburg. So if you're only in for 6 weeks, whether he was in before or after that, again, I don't know.
Right. So it's 6 weeks, take some time off, come back. You can do that.
I think so.
Yeah.
But certainly Crawford, by this time, being placed in a more prominent leadership role, I'm sure to some degree or another was feeling the pressure, I need to brush up.
Yeah.
And being the student he was, I'm sure he was taking time to do that. I mean, not everybody who is not militarily trained is a poor. I mean, think about Chamberlain.
Right. Fantastic.
Yeah. So you need to learn on-the-job training.
The whole thing with leaders, though, there's all these leadership things that companies do, and they'll, and no one ever comes out of that a leader. You either are or you aren't.
Right. You're natural born leader. You're not, right?
And most people, I think, who are natural born leaders don't go out and say, hey, everybody, I'm a natural born leader. Follow me. They just are. And people flock to them and say, what do we do?
Sure.
And, now in the military, it's different because there's a hierarchy and there's, you're supposed to follow the leader and somebody else decides who that leader is.
Right. And with the whole seniority thing during the Civil War, you might have somebody that became a colonel a day after you that's much better suited, but tough luck until I get shot, right?
Exactly. But and you might have a guy who is a lieutenant and highly respected by his men. Yeah. But he's got to follow the orders of a captain who is not respected not even by the lieutenant, and the lieutenant knows it, but he's got to do his job and he's got to take his men into stupid situations.
Right. And it's here where we also start seeing some more criticism of Crawford by some of the men, claiming that his leadership can sometimes be aloof and he's very excited. So, there's other individuals I've read that about who were not bad leaders. And it's just how I think on many occasions individuals interpret it.
Right.
So I'm not saying he's the greatest leader, but he's far from the worst too. And he wants to do well and he wants to learn. And perhaps, again, he may overthink some things leading to delays on the field that otherwise maybe a leader would react more quickly to, if you follow me.
Yeah.
But it's claimed by some of the men, he did have difficulty in a balance of strong discipline when it's needed and maybe just being a guy, one of the guys at other times when it's not needed. Apparently, he was very much accused of liking to drill and discipline his men. And maybe they need a day off, guy. Maybe once in a while you need a day off.
I wonder how much of that was for them as it was for him.
That's right.
Right, like he's trying to drill himself by drilling his men.
That's exactly right. And sometimes you can overdo it and really spoil the whole thing and your reputation. And we all know it only takes one or two people to start saying things. And
unfortunately,
yeah. Leading up to, this is in the Valley now in 1862, leading up to the Battle of Cedar Mountain, he was entrusted to do some scouting and recon, his brigade and some of his men, for Banks, which he apparently did maybe not the best job, but certainly adequately. And then when Cedar Mountain was rolling around August 9th of 62, he placed some of the initial Union batteries, and his brigade was one of the first, if not the first, on the battlefield. Interestingly, on the east side of a wheat field.
Not the wheat field.
Not the wheat field at Gettysburg, but the wheat field at Cedar Mountain.
Right.
Cedar Mountain's battlefield, northern portion was a small scrub field, then was a wheat field coming south, and below that was a cornfield. And Crawford's brigade was to the east side of the wheat field.
Like they'll be here.
Yeah.
But
the Confederates, Jackson's division was arriving on the west side and deploying. And so when that battle opened up, Crawford's men attacked over that wheat field in one of the earliest Union attacks. And 3rd Wisconsin was... the 10th Maine, I believe, was heavily mauled. 3rd Wisconsin actually gained some footage over that wheat field and actually turned the right flank on some of Jackson's men and actually broke some of that line. And of course, this is that famous fight where Jackson was trying to rally his men and went to pull his sword out of the scabbard. It was rusted in the scabbard, so he couldn't pull it out. There's a true leader. I never even used my sword. It's rusted in place.
Right.
That's a fantastic story. But, he fared fairly well at Cedar Mountain. To his left was Christopher Augur's division with brigades under Candy, Geary. So familiar names to Gettysburg.
Sure.
And eventually, after what would hope to have been a good showing by the Union, they were forced to leave the field. And Jackson could claim that victory. And of course, this is going to be leading up to that summer campaign in the Valley, Manassas, Second Manassas, and eventually ending up at Antietam. Post-battle at Cedar Mountain, again, another one of those stories, if it ain't true, it ought to be. Apparently, a ceasefire was recognized in order to attend to the dead and wounded, which you want to think that happened.
Yeah, sure.
You want to believe that.
Yeah.
But one of the Confederate officers on the field doing this was Jeb Stuart. And he approached Crawford and George Bayard, and they were overseeing some of the process of their own brigade, taking the wounded off the field and such. And Stuart and Crawford would meet and have a light lunch together in the battle. Whatever that means, I don't know.
Right.
A couple of hard biscuits or something.
Right, probably.
But that battle, Crawford's brigade went into battle with reportedly 1,767 and only had 867 afterwards.
Wow.
So they lost about 900 killed, wounded, and missing in that battle. So they were in the heat of it.
You know, we always think about Gettysburg and its casualties and everything, and they're astounding to most of us. But, like, I mean, it's just Gettysburg was, you know, among the worst. But, I mean, even these battles that don't get as much attention as Gettysburg have these ridiculous casualties.
Well, can you imagine that number today?
No.
Completely unacceptable.
No, I know.
Oh, my gosh.
No,
that's horrible.
We have a hard time with just, you know, two. Not just two, you know what I mean?
Well, yeah.
But, I mean, you know, we have a hard time hearing that two were killed. And then, and then here you have hundreds, thousands in one battle. After battle, after battle, after battle. It's got to be devastating for the people back home.
Oh, my gosh, yeah.
To hear this. Yeah. Especially because, you know, unlike today, you know, word didn't travel too fast. Maybe word of a battle traveled fast enough, but the Army's still reeling. They haven't taken account of everybody. They can't get the word out to you.
It's whatever the correspondents are sending back to their papers in the North.
Right. And so it's, and like, imagine that, like, where you just, you know, they post a list of casualties from a battle, and you go down there and you see that your son or your husband or whatever is on that list, and now this horrible grief is a very public thing for you immediately because everybody else is there.
And to them, it's a faraway land.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Am I ever going to have closure by having the body returned here for
How do I get him?
Burial or something? Yeah.
It's awful.
So, you know, keep in mind, this is really he wrote of Crawford, it was difficult for a man who devoted 15 years of his career and life to medicine and caring for others to justify the death and carnage.
It had to be. And I was wondering this last night when I was reading up on him for this. His instincts that brought him to become a doctor. Now you're a general.
Yeah.
And your job is not to heal the wounded, but I've got to imagine at times he had to be very conflicted where the doctor in him wanted to go and take care of something, but the general in him wouldn't be allowed to.
And perhaps that was some of the issue he was dealing with on the battlefield, delaying things, you know.
Yeah.
I told my father, I told my family, I dedicated my life to medicine, and now I'm forcing these men to go off and get shot.
Right. And I can't take care of them.
Right.
That's got to be the hard thing.
Right. But it would help him at Antietam when he became a casualty.
Yeah. Sure.
So General Alpheus Williams said of Crawford following Cedar Mountain.
Yeah.
This is a quote from the reports. These men fought with a heroism hardly found in the records of war, and their commanders, Crawford and Gordon being one of the commanders under Crawford.
Right, not John Gordon, the Confederate.
Yeah. So Crawford and Gordon gave prompt, zealous cooperation and demand a special commendation. So there's a higher ranking officer, the divisional commander, saying, yeah, this guy, you know, he did okay.
Yeah, okay.
He did okay. So that was probably reassuring to Crawford himself, who may have had some secondary doubts because of this carnage.
Right.
And because of, you know, what Wagner said about how do you justify this?
Did he ever write about it that you're aware of? Crawford write about how the carnage affected the doctor in him?
You know, it's one of those things that there are red flags. You know, how is this affecting this man mentally? Mm-hmm. And it goes back to some of the letters he would write to his sister in New York about, I need some time off. I need to get back to Pennsylvania. I need to recharge, that sort of thing. So you can read things into it, and whether they are accurate or not is, we'll never know.
Sure.
We'll never know. Following that, and throughout the summer leading up to Antietam, his brigade was bolstered by some new regiments, mostly untrained, certainly not seeing combat, that being the 124th, 125th, 128th Pennsylvania. So now he has some Pennsylvanians under his command. And at Antietam, he is going to be put to another test. So the army is somewhat reorganized. We know Pope said bye-bye to Pope.
Right.
So now we have McClellan in charge. And as some reorganization takes place, Banks is gone, and now Mansfield is commanding the 12th Corps, of which Crawford and Williams are part. Again, retaining that division, Williams is, and Crawford is part of that division. 1st Brigade, 1st Division. And, not going to spend a lot of time on the various battles. That's
right.
We're talking about.
This is a biographical.
Yeah. Who were we talking about?
I don't remember. Cindy Crawford.
Okay. So the 12th Corps, after Hooker struggled on the federal right and in the cornfield, Mansfield is ordered in. And we know the story of Antietam going in piecemeal. Mansfield's 12th Corps goes into the cornfield, and he actually directed the 10th Maine, part of Crawford's brigade, to lead into the cornfield. Mansfield would not too long afterwards be struck and mortally wounded.
So he pulled a John Reynolds. John Reynolds
did. Yeah, I guess he kind of did.
Yeah.
But as the 10th Maine is marching into the cornfield, they turn and fire into the woods to their right. So they're marching
south.
So that would be the West Woods,
I believe.
Right?
If I'm getting this right, yes.
And Mansfield said, no, those are our own men. And of course, like any 12-year-old's going to say, well, they shot at us first. So they continued firing, and Mansfield said, oh, maybe they aren't Union troops. So the battle continued. Mansfield will be struck, and he is going to, obviously, he will die there, and he will subsequently relinquish command to the senior divisional commander, who was Williams. So Williams now is elevated temporarily to Corps command, and Crawford, being senior brigade commander, is elevated to divisional command. So this is his first taste commanding troops numbering that much, that large in command. The untested PA regiments are going to do very well. They're going to prove themselves. The division is ordered, it's my understanding, to pull back, and I didn't do a lot of refreshing in my mind, which I should have. I'm guilty of not doing that to kind of get things straight, but Crawford's men begin to pull back with the understanding that Sedgwick is coming up to relieve them and give them support. But Crawford's men do get re-engaged, and somewhere in the cornfield, Crawford receives a wound to his right thigh. And this is where his medical training instinctively kicked in, and he examines, probably with his hand, trying to probe a little bit, but it's not too bad. So he continues in the saddle, and it's only after that unit is pulled off the field, and the battle just rages the rest of the day. But it's only after the 12th Corps is back where he can seek medical examination and the division surgeon is going to examine and say, yeah, this isn't great. He removes a piece of mini ball, a piece of lead, and some bone. And this thigh wound is going to haunt him for the rest of his life.
So it's a deep wound. It's not a flesh wound.
It's affected the bone and shattered some bone in there, because we hear of that reportedly later in the war and later in life, where it's still oozing and pieces of bone come out of the wound.
That's
so
amazing.
Now it's that and malaria that will recur throughout his life. Crawford's division suffered about 25% casualties at Antietam. So another, substantial number. The wound became infected, and again, it's going to cause him problems. But because of this deep wound, this infection, he does receive the equivalent of a medical furlough, medical leave, to try to heal up.
Okay.
And where does he go? Goes to Franklin County, goes to Allendale, and he's there with portions of his family, just recuperating.
What's amazing is, there's a lot of a big deal made of John Reynolds, coming up here because, he lives just down the road. But it's Lancaster's further away than Chambersburg is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, Crawford, this really is Crawford's backyard here.
Yeah.
When we get here, we're not there yet in the story. But
and his home is, as I said, Allendale is just a couple of short miles from the base of South Mountain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So he's recuperating there.
He's
completely unaware that in a few short months, there's going to, almost a year, there's going to be a fight here in his backyard.
Sure.
Of course.
But
we're all unaware.
He's also completely unaware that in a few short weeks, he's going to be run out of his home.
Oh.
So in about the 10th of October, 1962, this is following Antietam. And remember, McClellan has his army pretty much stagnant in Maryland. And Lee is across the river. And Lee says, hey, Jeb, come here. So he calls Stuart into the headquarters for a meeting and gives him orders, explicit orders. And Stuart's orders are essentially to go to Chambersburg, destroy what you can of the Cumberland Valley Railroad that came from Harrisburg, because that was a prime supply line for McClellan's army. Destroy that, disrupt the railroad traffic, try to destroy the bridge over the Conococheague at Scotland, and keep moving. And what we want to do is disrupt that supply line of McClellan, try to get him antsy and moving, find out what information you can. This is not a raid intended to occupy. This is a kind of a hit and run thing. So by the 10th, 11th, Stuart is in Chambersburg, creating havoc, burning the depot before riding off to the east. And in advance of him is a young lady from the Fayetteville area by the name, I have her name, I can't remember it. I should.
Just make up a name.
Betty Sue.
Betty Sue McGinty.
Betty Sue McGinty. Now,
maybe 6 Questions knows it.
I'm sure he does. Where is he?
He's in the audience.
Oh,
right
is he?
Now. Yeah.
Now I have it. Sally Horner.
Sally Horner.
Close. There it is. Close to living in the neighborhood of Fayetteville. Well, she news is traveling pretty fast, so it doesn't take long for everybody in the area to understand the Confederates are in the backyard. She rides to Allendale, where Crawford is convalescing, and says, hey, and whether it's true or not, I don't know how Stuart would know Crawford is specifically there. But, you say things. And, hey, Stuart's looking for you. So Crawford packs up what he can in his buggy and makes his way over the mountain to Gettysburg, where he gets on a train, makes his way to Harrisburg, and eventually New York City, where he spends the rest of his convalescing time with his sister.
Wow.
So it's possible when Stuart moved to the east they may have been able to capture because the farm's not that far off of 30,
right,
off the Chambersburg-Gettysburg Pike. But whether they knew that he was there to look for him or not, I don't know.
Right. Yeah. I mean, how would they know unless some locals,
unless somebody told them?
Yeah. Right. Well, right, because there are Confederate sympathizers there. Sure. Yeah.
So anyway, Stuart over the mountain, Cashtown, heads south, eventually reunites with Lee. So that was his second ride around the Army.
Okay.
Ride around the Union Army.
We're going to have to do an episode on that one day. Do you know a lot about his 62 raid up here?
Yeah, I usually include that with my Franklin County and Chambersburg tours.
Yeah, well, we should do one on that because that's interesting.
Yeah, we can do that. So he's going to spend time in New York City. I think his entire convalescing time, it was a number of months. And finally, he's going to receive orders to report to Washington, where he has the glamorous duty of serving on a court-martial board.
Okay.
Who was being court-martialed, I don't know. He wasn't on that board terribly long. May 19th, 1863, he is relieved from that duty, and he is assigned to the defenses of Washington under the command of General Samuel Heintzelman.
Okay.
And he's not going to be there terribly long either, because in a few short weeks, Heintzelman on the 3rd of June is going to assign him command of the 1st and the 3rd Brigades of the Pennsylvania Reserves. So he's got some pretty big shoes to fill.
Right.
Reynolds, Meade, Crawford.
Yeah.
So, I'm sure he is ecstatic about that. I'm sure he is feeling a tremendous amount of honor. And out of all of his commands, not that there were a tremendous large amount or number of them, but out of all his commands, it's the reserves that he would always refer to and try to get people to know and remember in later life.
People love the reserves.
They do.
Even to this day.
They do. There's some dude that used to be here that, he's gung-ho about it.
Yeah, Eric the producer.
Eric the producer.
Loves them.
Yeah. So I'm not going to talk a lot about the reserves. You certainly have had a lot of information about them over the years, but it's like I said, very big shoes to fill.
Now they're at this point though. Let's talk a little bit about them. So
they're in the defenses of Washington.
Right. They're in the defenses, and he's taking over for
just the 1st and the 3rd Brigades.
Oh, right. Okay. So now what's
the 2nd is there as well.
Right.
And as the Pennsylvania campaign, the 1860 the Gettysburg Campaign kicks off, McCandless, commander of the brigade in the reserves, he actually confers with Crawford saying, what are we doing here? We need to be part of this. They're marching north. They're going to be in Pennsylvania.
In our state. Yeah.
Yeah. We don't know where they're going to be, but they're going to be in our state.
Yeah.
So Crawford goes to General Hooker and meets with him to seek a transfer, and it was granted. And it wouldn't be long before he actually asked for the 2nd Brigade to be reunited with the 1st and 3rd. And Halleck says no. And they are retained in the defensive around
Got to keep
DC.
Somebody somewhere.
Keep somebody there. So the 1st and 3rd are marching northward, and I don't know exactly when. I think it's a little bit later when they're actually given the assignment with the 5th Corps. But they are marching north to be joining the Army of the Potomac. They cross the Potomac River on June 27th, and they continue into Maryland where they camp near Frederick. Okay? So that same day, the 27th, Hill's command has already been turned east from Chambersburg by Lee. Longstreet is in Chambersburg. Ewell was moving up the valley. Early has already passed through Gettysburg towards York. But Hill's 3rd Corps is around Fayetteville, around his home. And some of the men, because of writings of Senior, who still is there, he's not in Philly. He's at Allendale. And he's experiencing firsthand Hill's Corps, coming in and demanding food, demanding to be fed. And again, another one of those stories, and I can't remember where I read this one. Some Confederate soldiers supposedly had made a fine meal of poultry from the Crawford family peacock.
Oh.
And when Senior had learned of this, whether it be firsthand or not, he had had enough, and he demanded from Hill, whose headquarters was at Font Hill, just across the field from Allendale, and that home still stands as well. Huh. He demanded an audience with Hill and voiced his displeasure with this, and apparently Hill said okay and placed guards around the Crawford home.
Oh wow!
Allendale, which,
knowing that it was the father of,
whether he knew or not, I don't.
Okay, we don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah, the coincidences of war are funny.
Yeah,
right?
they are.
But I mean, it makes total sense that these things could happen. It's a civil war, right?
Yeah,
it's a small world.
And how many of these men interacted with one another before the war?
Yeah, right.
And how many Confederates attended Carlisle?
Yep.
Barracks?
Yes. Right. Ewell did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was familiar.
And he was hanging out up there.
And that's the reason he didn't burn the barracks when he was up there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, apparently it had the desired effect and protected anything else belonging to the Crawfords. June 30th, and I might say also the 1st and the 3rd brigades in Crawford's corps, for his division, and I got this out of the Llano Atlas.
Okay.
So 2862 effectives prior to Gettysburg. Okay, 2862. So the 30th of June, we know the fateful interaction or visual interaction between Buford and Pettigrew. That same day, the reserves marched 25 miles. They crossed the Mason-Dixon line into Pennsylvania, so now they're on their home turf. Mm-hmm. And I should have looked it up, but I'm sure there was some fanfare crossing that border into Pennsylvania. And they continued to McSherrystown, which is just outside of Hanover, where they camped for the night. On July 2nd of 63, Crawford early in the morning received marching orders. Head to Gettysburg at dawn. So he had his men up and marching by dawn. They arrived by the Baltimore Pike near Rock Creek and were most likely bivouacked temporarily or positioned temporarily on the Musser farm across from Dean Schultz's farm.
Oh,
his home.
Yeah. Okay. Down in the Baltimore Pike.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And eventually, that same day, July 2nd, he received, by that time, he had been assigned to Sykes' 5th Corps. And that was an understrength corps, so he made up another division.
Yeah.
And that corps would receive marching orders, and most likely they are going to use the Granite Schoolhouse lane to the Blacksmith Shop Road coming in on the east side of Little Round Top.
Right.
And by that time, Warren's been up there. Vincent's been up, already got his men positioned. Crawford is assigned a position on the northern slope of Little Round Top, which he would, in his writings, call the Rocky Ridge, overlooking Lake Crawford and the Plum Run Valley. And I can imagine his men, the reserves with the 13th with their bucktails are probably looking for beaver to shoot at.
Absolutely. It's a plentiful supply down there.
Yeah. We can have a beaver lunch. Maybe we can put beaver tails in our hats to supplement the white tails.
We'll be known as the beaver tails from now on, all because of Gettysburg.
Wouldn't that be a hoot? So they are positioned on the northern slope of Little Round Top, and Sykes had then been requested to provide support for the Union left. So Crawford detaches Joseph Fisher's brigade, minus the 11th Pennsylvania. minus the 11th Pennsylvania Reserves, because the 11th Pennsylvania was Sally out
Right,
the first
right,
day. So
right,
the 11th
right.
Pennsylvania Reserves would be the 40.
Add 29, don't you?
Add 29, so it's the 40th.
40th.
Right?
No,
40th.
I don't remember. Yes.
Okay.
I can't do math in my head. Yes, 40th.
Yeah, so the 40th. So the 40th, or the 11th PA Reserves, stays with McCandless and Crawford. Fisher goes around. Whether Crawford actually ever went around there to confer any more with Fisher, I'm not clear. But Crawford, again, we're not going to get into the reserves, what they did, but where Crawford was known to be and what he did. And eventually, he is, along with McCandless and that brigade, those reserves are probably around Gibbs Battery, protecting them somewhat, giving them some reassurance, but they can see what's going on.
Is Gibbs Battery the one up on the north slope there? Yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And there are writings of how they watched the day's regulars being driven back, fighting hard on Houck's Ridge and near the wheat field and being driven back across the valley. And I don't think you pulled that one image.
Which one?
It was that illustration.
No, I don't think I have any illustrations in here.
Let me look real quick. I don't know. I may not have printed that one out.
I don't know. No, I don't have that in here.
Okay, I didn't print that one out. But there is an illustration.
But I do have this one. Have you seen this one here? Major Taylor about to run Robert E. Lee through. Do you remember this part of the movie? Do you remember this? No, you don't remember.
Man, maybe he was a court-martial for being a traitor, huh? Wow.
Yeah, let's see here. I'll for the people as well so they can see a little better. There's
Major Taylor, we do not have time for that. This jocularity.
Yes, right. No fun, Major Taylor. No fun.
This is not a time for levity.
Nope.
I have told you there is no time for that.
There's no time.
All right.
So eventually, push comes and Crawford is going to be ordered to make this attack. And I think one of the questions from the listener was, who issued those orders? Mm-hmm. Well, it's going to come down from Sykes. Just protocol.
Right.
Where Sykes got the order, I don't know. But eventually that's going to make its way to Crawford, who is going to order McCandless to take his brigade across that valley. And they will do so with Crawford really trying to take the lead. And he grabs the national colors from the flag bearer, who says, no, this is my day.
Right.
So Crawford, oh shit, I had the Dale Gown painting in my truck I wanted to bring in.
Well, after the break.
Yeah,
you can get it during the break.
Yeah. So he's mounted on the horse, and his thigh is bothering him, but he's got the reins he has the reins in the left hand, and he's not doing Rooster Cogburn in the mouth.
Right.
And he's got the flagstaff in the other hand, and the flag bearer says, no, that's my responsibility,
right,
sir.
Yep.
And he grabs the pant leg of Crawford and stays with him.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, the monument we have today shows him standing there holding it.
Right, but he was on a horse.
He was on a horse.
And he had a sergeant on his leg.
And the main reason is that he's not on a horse in that monument is a horse costs a lot more money to replicate in bronze.
Sure, yeah. Got to be economical.
Oh, yeah, he's a little frugal there. So, but he makes his charge, and the regulars, the reserves do that outstanding job across Plum Run. And of course, by this time, in all fairness, Confederates are pretty much played out.
Yeah.
After how many attacks and counterattacks?
Right. They don't have reserves that they're throwing in.
No.
Right.
No, they don't. But this ends up being one of the final Union counterattacks in that portion of the battlefield. And of course, Nevin is off to the right with the 6th Corps. They've arrived, so they're coming in to help off to the right around the Weichert Farm. But Crawford's men right across the Valley of Death, the northern portion of that, against that stone wall where they're going to take up a position. The eastern side of the wheat field.
Were there any drownings in the lake?
Not that I'm aware of. This was really, compared to maybe some hesitation on Crawford at other times, which would become apparent trying to discern orders at the wheat field. I'm sorry, in the wilderness. He went.
Yeah.
There was no waiting for the pontoon bridges to come.
Right. So they had to trudge through that lake.
Yeah.
For just for the sake of people who are very new to all this stuff, when we mention this lake, we're joking. There's a lake there now.
Derisively,
we're joking. It is what? May 6th. And as of May 6th, the recording of this episode, there is, in fact, a lake there. There was not one there during the time of the battle. There was a little stream called Plum Run, and Crawford Lake is one of the many names people have made up now. So, just so you know, I don't want to confuse anybody. FYI. There was no fighting through or rowing through the lake during the Battle of Gettysburg.
So this counterattack, again, one of the last in the area, securing that area. The Confederates would still retain a position on the other side of the wheat field in the woods, but essentially the fighting is now continuing to move upstream, up Cemetery Ridge. Samuel would write of the actions of the reserves at Gettysburg for the remaining years of his life, and he was really trying to get them the recognition he believed they were due. Whether or not it was warranted or not, being as tired and worn out as the Confederates were, they still provided that service, and they assured that the Confederates ended any further attacks in that area. Okay. And I believe he developed a pretty strong bond with them.
I would imagine that would.
Yeah, because he's going to command them throughout the remainder of the war until their enlistments are running out.
Right.
Yeah.
And I would say, a lot of people, there's an argument of who really saved Little Round Top, the reserves or Chamberlain?
Or Warren.
Well, I think it's a team effort.
And incidentally, Warren, not on the staff of Meade at this point, will eventually, and we'll talk about this, became the 5th Corps commander. Mm-hmm. So Warren and Crawford definitely had a relationship.
Sure.
Whether they knew one another prior to this or not, or at this time, I don't know, but it's going to develop. It's going to continue to develop.
To me, it's Vincent.
Yeah, I think so.
Because he had to have the cojones to break protocol and take it upon himself to go up without orders to do so.
Sure.
Had he not done that, it would have been a different story.
Or had he failed, it would have been a different story.
Yes. In both scenarios, the South still would have lost the Battle of Gettysburg and the war.
I believe
I just want to get that clear to everybody who is hoping that maybe I gave you a way where you could change history. You can't.
No, you can't. You cannot.
Why? Because
and
the reserves, the rest of the 5th Corps, they're all there's so many more troops behind that mountain.
And no one regiment or brigade fights in a vacuum.
No.
It's all part of the puzzle.
Right.
Right.
It's great for a movie. It's great for a novel.
Yeah.
Not great for reality.
That's right. Let's be all inclusive.
Right.
And that's one of the problems that I still face reading or even watching a movie is you have to tell the story piece by piece when things are happening all at the same time.
Yeah, right. And it's very confusing. You don't have all the time in the world to tell these stories. I mean, even if you're writing a history book, you can't include everything.
Yeah.
I was talking to Scott Hartwig about his Antietam books, and that, for as comprehensive and as huge and voluminous as they are, he's like, there's so many things I couldn't get in there.
Yeah.
It's such a huge story. How do you tell that story? Unless he was going to do like a 30-volume
How do you do that? You
Right.
have to condense. Something has to be left.
Yeah. That would be cool, though, if you did, like, what was it, like how long of a battle was that? 12 hours-ish?
Antietam?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say.
Yeah.
More or less. I don't know
Like,
exactly,
if you
but-
did an hour-by-hour 12-volume set, you still couldn't get all the stories in.
No.
Is my point.
No.
That's what I'm saying.
Well, and stories are still coming to light.
Well, oh, yeah. Oh, right. Right. We're still finding
We're
new
still
things.
learning things.
Yeah. Yeah. It never ends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Crawford, a couple of days goes by, and on July 5th, 1863, and this is the first time mentioning this, that it's not just the two Crawford brothers who are in the Army, and it's not just John who's with the Christian Commission. Margaret's, and this is Samuel Jr.'s older sister, Margaret has a husband that joined the Army.
Ah.
And on the 5th of July, Samuel Wylie Crawford Jr. learns that his brother-in-law, who had been wounded, has died at Vicksburg.
Oh, so he's not even here.
No.
He's in Vicksburg.
And he dies the tragic death of the Zouaves in the Sherfy farm.
Okay.
So he has wounded.
Wait, say that again? What?
He dies the same type of death.
Oh, the same type of death.
Yeah.
Okay. Burned.
He is wounded during the siege or possibly one of the attacks, and he is in a shed somewhere outside of Vicksburg.
It catches fire.
And artillery strikes it, catches fire, and he perishes in that. So, again, here's a guy who has devoted 15 years of his life to medicine, and now it's hitting home. It's not just these men you're developing this ongoing relationship with. It's someone your sister is married to, who has been tragically taken by a horrible way to die.
Yeah.
Burning. So he began struggling with that, and how that affected him psychologically, we'll never know, but certainly it must have had some degree of effect on him.
Sure.
Following Bristow Station, he is going to return to Allendale for another medical leave as his malaria recurs. So he's continuing to deal with that. The Antietam wound is continuing to bother him. And as spring of 1864 rolls around, again, we're going to have another reorganization of the Army of the Potomac. Essentially, Gettysburg has affected the Army.
Yeah, big time.
Big time.
Yeah.
The 11th and 12th Corps shipped south or west to serve with Sherman. Essentially, the 1st and 3rd Corps no longer exist. They are absorbed. And the 7 Corps here at Gettysburg are now down to 3. The 2nd, the 5th, the 6th.
But they're larger because they're consolidating, right?
Yeah, and they are receiving new regiments,
Right.
but also the battle-hardened veterans.
Right.
The remnants of some of those regiments that are very small, the size of companies and some.
But they're still keeping those as separate regiments. They're not putting them in.
Many of them are.
Many, but not all of them.
You fight and die with these men under this name. That's what you want to retain.
Right. So, but they're not swelling their ranks with new recruits.
In some instances, they will have replacements come in, but by and large, you're getting a lot new regiments.
Right.
And that's where you're getting some of these regiments with the higher number.
Right. I thought I read somewhere that in the North, they tended to just make new regiments, whereas in the South, they would put them in old regiments.
Well, that could be.
So you would have green men and veterans together.
That could be.
Yeah.
That could be more
I don't know where
likely,
I read that.
More likely to happen in the South.
No, that's a good point, yeah.
So the 5th Corps by the spring of 1864, and keep in mind the winter encampment, Crawford is in and around Culpeper with the rest of the Army of the Potomac, but he has at some time taken off this medical care, but he will reunite. And by the time Grant takes over, spring of 64, early May, the Army of the Potomac leaves its winter encampment around Culpeper down the Germanna Plank Road to the wilderness.
Good times in the wilderness.
The good times in the wilderness. The 5th Corps is now commanded by G.K. Warren.
Okay.
So Crawford is still divisional commander. And there will be some shifting of officers throughout the remainder of the war, and we'll talk about some of them. He is, again, still suffering from malaria and from his thigh wound, and I guess it was to his advantage that his younger brother on his staff was able to help him somewhat in day-to-day jobs around the headquarters, the divisional headquarters. May 64, we mentioned the Wilderness Campaign is going to kick off. Crawford's division left Culpeper County encampment on May 4th, and the division is now 3 brigades of infantry. They cross the Rapidan, end up around Parker's store in the wilderness, and he made his headquarters by the end of that day near Warren's headquarters, near the Lacey House, which is probably familiar to some Jackson fans out there. By the 5th of May, Crawford's division led the march, and they ended up on the left end of the Union line on some favorable ground. And when they broke connection with the division to their right, who I think was Wadsworth. I think was Wadsworth.
I'm sure someone in the audience will know the answer.
But regardless, Warren ordered him to regain connection with the unit on his right. And this is where he hesitated a little bit because I got good ground. Why do I want to leave this? And finally, a young man still in Warren's staff by the name of Washington Roebling.
Oh, I've heard of him.
Yeah. Another man from Little Round Top.
Yep.
He would visit Crawford to look over the area, and he agreed. He agreed, this is pretty favorable land, but we need to connect.
Right.
So Washington Roebling became ready for the pun? The bridge between Crawford and
Because he built
Warren.
the Brooklyn Bridge, folks. That's why. That's what that.
He became the bridge between those two. Again, not doing a deep dive into the wilderness in Crawford there. I know that they were engaged a little bit. I'm not sure what casualties may have been, but Crawford did receive a minor wound, again, in the form of a tree burst of Confederate artillery above him, raining the limbs and branches down on he and his men, struck him in the head, not enough to leave the field. Again, day's end, he did seek medical attention, and the attending physician or surgeon, divisional or regimental, what I imagine it was the divisional surgeon, treated him, bandaged his head, but also took notice that his thigh wound was still noticeably bothering him, his Antietam wound. But his division had been forced back. But again, serving well enough in the leadership role.
He stayed in position.
Yeah, he stayed in command.
It's the same argument or piece of evidence that people point to when talking about Meade and what a good general he was. And they said, well, he retained command of the Army of the Potomac longer than anybody else.
Yeah, sure.
So, I mean, obviously he was good enough.
There's not a whole lot of officers out there on either side who have all fans.
Of course.
You know, there's opponents as well. Everybody.
Yes, because why would we want to
agree, right?
Yeah.
Man, we don't want that. So, following the wilderness, Weldon Railroad, also known as Globe Tavern. By then, some of the reserves enlistments are running out. So he's sad that they're departing. but I'm sure there's a piece of them that says, good for you.
Yeah, right, of course.
Lucky you. Okay. But August 18th, 21st, Battle of Weldon Railroad, Globe Tavern. Crawford was opposing another Gettysburg name, William Mahone. And while studying the battle from horseback prior to any severe engagements, he was struck by a spent minie ball in the chest. Oof. Not, again, severe enough to be forcing him off the field. And by September of 1964, there was another 5th Corps reorganization. Warren still retained command overall, but Crawford's division now, his brigade, the 1st Brigade, was under Edward Bragg. 2nd Brigade under another Gettysburg name, Henry Baxter. Mm-hmm. And then the 3rd Brigade under William Hoffman. By December of that year, Crawford had received a brevet Major General of U.S. Volunteers. So he is continuing to show himself favorably, rise through the ranks.
His brigadier rank, was that breveted or was that an actual?
It was a volunteers. Oh,
okay.
And as was this. So that one was not a brevet. It was a formal.
It was.
Yeah.
The brigadier.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So when it's all over.
And this is Major General.
Right.
The brevet.
Okay.
Which, if you receive it, then you're going to call yourself Major General.
Of course. But now, how does that? So at the end of the war, though, because he was actually commissioned a brigadier general, that was like a real promotion.
Yeah, but you revert back when the war's over. You revert back to the regular army,
to the pre-war.
Yeah, and we'll get into that.
Okay.
What he would retain after the war.
Gotcha.
We're moving towards the end of the war, and I did do a little bit deeper dive into Five Forks because there's a lot of Warren fans out there who got pretty pissed off at the way he was treated at immediately following Five Forks.
Sure. And
Crawford became, to some of them, a scapegoat. So let's kind of take a look at this. Again, leading up to Five Forks, the week before, there's a number of battles. We have Lewis Farm, we have Dinwiddie Courthouse, we have White Oak Road. Okay, and White Oak Road, I think, was the 31st. I don't know. It was the 31st of March, and then because Five Forks was April.
Okay,
first of April, I believe. So leading up to that, Crawford, during White Oak Road, Crawford's men were not comfortable with how close the Confederate forces were, and they were entrenched on the other side of White Oak Road. And by this time, one of the other divisions, the other 3 divisions in Warren's Corps, it's Ayers, it's Griffin, and it's Crawford. Roman Ayers, another Gettysburg name. So Ayers is leading a force across the field, broken field, trees, ravines, etc., towards White Oak Road when he comes under fire by the Confederates who were under Johnson. And they essentially are outnumbered, but they are beating the Federals to the punch there and counterattacking and driving Ayers' men back. Ayers' men aren't expecting this, and they break. They're supposed to be supported by Crawford, who is there, but Ayers' men break and run back through Crawford, which in turn the panic spreads.
Right, of course.
And Griffin is in the rear as a reserve and I think holds the line. Other men are thrown in. Long story short, Ayers does rally, the Federals rally and drive the Confederates back. But Ayers has a little bit, I guess, of perhaps contempt for Crawford for not being there as he felt he should be. Whether that's accurate or not, or whether it's looking for someone to blame, I don't care.
Right.
It happened.
Right.
It happened. But at the day's end, the Federals lost men that they weren't prepared to lose, but they did drive the Confederates back. So this is leading to the next day when Warren receives orders from both Grant and Sheridan to Sheridan hopes to be able to strike a decisive victory or a decisive blow by surrounding and flank attacks against the force at Five Forks.
Right.
Grant says, I can send Warren. Sheridan wants the Sixth Corps to come help. And Grant says, I can't spare the Sixth Corps. I can't do that. They're on the other side. I can give you the Fifth. So Warren has given orders. And of course, long story short, this gets into the whole storm, the flooded, what was the stream? It wasn't Hatcher's Run, or was it? There's a flooded stream, a bridge washed out. So Warren cannot get his artillery. He cannot get his supply wagons. He has pioneers trying to rebuild the bridge. This delays him arriving to assist Sheridan to the east side of Five Forks, southeast side of Five Forks. In the meantime, Sheridan is there with his cavalry. Merritt is on the left with Custer and Fitzhugh, and I can't remember who else. Devon is in. Devon may not be up yet. Regardless,
Wilson?
I don't know. Regardless, the cavalry is holding attention of Pickett's men around Five Forks. Mm-hmm. And Pickett's men are there in force. And on the right end of Pickett's line is Fitz-Lee. And on the left end is Munford. Thomas Munford.
And his sons.
And his sons?
There's a band called Mumford and Sons.
Okay. Okay, so Warren does arrive, and he forms his entire corps back at the Gravelly Run Church. And Ayres is in the front rank. He's given explicit orders by Grant how to align your men. Sheridan will visit this. So it's Ayres in the front with Crawford to the right of Ayres, off of Ayres' right flank, and Griffin in the reserve in the rear behind Crawford. And each division is supposed to have, I believe, 2 ranks, 2 lines. So this is a pretty substantial line of battle to attack. While this is going on, DoorDash is not available. So some unknown reason, Fitzhugh Lee and George Pickett don't tell anybody they're going out for dinner.
Yes, to a shad bake.
To a shad bake.
Yeah.
General Rosser is back towards Gravelly Run. No, Hatcher's Run. Okay. Back towards Hatcher's Run, where he has put a seine in the creek and the shad are running. Mm-hmm. And they have an ambulance full of shad that they clean and they begin to roast. So dispositions are made by Pickett and Lee, but not to the point of this is where we're going to be. This is when we'll be back. And they are enjoying themselves when this battle breaks out. And this is another one of those instances, as I'm reading this and studying this, where you have to remember things are happening either at the same time or right upon one another, not distinct chapters like in a book. Right. So Warren's men are given orders by Sheridan. This is what you do. You attack because Sheridan has lined them up. Warren's men are lined up on the extreme left flank of Pickett's line. In fact, where the return is. Okay. So they have refused their line in that back part known as the return. They're out there, and they are supposed to attack that flank, while hopefully Sheridan is going to be able to do the other side, the other end. So it's not wide open Pickett's charged fields. Right. There are some ravines. There are some naturally forming terrain features that are going to break up the disposition of the troops as they march, trees, etc. So Ayres is taking off, Crawford immediately to his right, and they begin to move forward. And Ayres is drawn into combat because they get up to, look over to our left. There's the end of the Confederate line. So they're going to begin to break off to the left or wheel to the left. And Crawford, there's enough gap between these two men. Crawford is not aware of that.
Okay.
And he continues off more or less to the northwest a little bit, I guess, but primarily north, with Griffin following behind because he's lined up behind Crawford.
Right.
So you have 2 divisions out of the 3 of Warren's corps going off track.
Got it.
Ayres is engaged. Warren is with them, and he realizes, okay, where's my corps? And he goes off in search of. Okay, Leonard Nimoy did a series on that.
I remember that.
Remember
yes,
that?
Of course,
in search of
yes.
Samuel Wylie Crawford. Eventually, Crawford's division gets ahead a little more so than Griffin, and Griffin is contacted and makes the shift to the west, to the left, earlier than Crawford, and actually goes up between those 2 divisions. Ayres on the left, Crawford on the right, and Griffin's men will engage some of the remnants further back on the Confederate return.
Okay.
So there's that fierce firefight going on there. Finally, Warren finds Crawford up near a farm behind. And this is where, the detractors say Crawford wasn't paying attention. He wasn't following orders. He went off on his own. He got lost. There are many people that say he got lost.
Right.
Well, perhaps he did, but Warren found him in time, and it was, in my opinion, in my untrained military mind, it became rather advantageous because Warren recognized the fact that now Crawford's behind the Confederate lines.
Gotcha.
So continue east or west, whichever direction. Continue off to the left, wheel to your left, because the Ford Road is one of those 5 forks.
Okay.
Coming due north almost out of 5 Forks. Pickett is on the Ford Road behind Pat Hatcher's Run. He receives information and can hear the gunfire. He and Lee, not Robert E., Fitzhugh. Yeah, they're making a mad dash back to see what's going on. Well, Crawford doesn't, I don't believe, ever come in contact, nearly catching them. Mm-hmm. But there are some men back there, some Confederates streaming back by that road, and Crawford cuts off the Ford Road. So he is behind the Confederate lines now, and Warren is essentially with him saying, continue marching straight ahead down this road, and you're going to crash into the backside of Pickett's men. And eventually what happens is Ayres and Griffin have driven so hard against the Confederate left, rolling that flank in. Now Warren gives him orders, change front to your right. So now they are hitting the backside of the right flank of Pickett's line. And this is essentially remnants of the infantry driven back there, but in large part, it's the backside of Fitzhugh Lee's cavalry.
Okay.
Protecting the flank, while Custer and Fitzhugh are striking the front side of it. So while this is going on, while especially Ayres' attack and probably part of Griffin, Sheridan is now in the middle of Ayres, riding, waving the flag, the national colors, urging Ayres' men on. And this is where he gets in his mind, well, Warren should be here leading. He's not. He's really with Crawford leading that portion. He's taking an active hand into getting the rest of his team back in the play.
Okay.
But Sheridan doesn't see him. And this is what leads to him dismissing Warren a little bit later. At the end of the day, essentially, you are relieved. But with Crawford being in the rear, cutting off the Ford Road, the Confederates that do escape really are going cross country now, off to the northwest, because the roads have been severed by Union infantry and cavalry. Yeah.
It goes to show, though, like, there's so much that can go wrong. There's so much that, a commander who issues an order might not be aware of that can get in the way of carrying out that order.
Sure.
And
you see what's in front of you.
Sure. Well, exactly right. I don't know. I feel bad for Warren. It's.
I do too. And he would fight. He would go and appeal to Grant, and that's another story. But he would go appeal to Grant, and eventually, he's feeling he must feel just utter frustration. He will with the process.
Later be exonerated.
He will be, but he's
too little, too late.
Yeah, he chooses to be buried in civilian clothes.
Yeah,
rather. But during the hearings, Crawford will testify on his behalf at the hearings, trying to exonerate him.
There you go. All right. So then
and he never really, in my readings, and I've not found anything where Warren pointed the finger.
Right. Yeah. So after Five Forks, then what's Crawford up to?
Crawford will remain in that neck of the woods, and he will actually be that corps, the 5th Corps, now under Griffin. Griffin is elevated to Corps Commander. And I should say that Chamberlain is in on that fight as well.
Right.
Yeah, Chamberlain is there in the 20th Maine. So, here we have these forces that were, or at least leadership and portions of the men who were here at Gettysburg on the Round Top are reunited there. Interestingly, following that battle, and you hear these numbers thrown about, and you have to take them with a grain of salt, but Crawford's division claims to have taken somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,000 prisoners at Five Forks. Federals captured a total of, I think, 6 guns, and Crawford's division captured 4 of them.
Wow. Okay. So they performed well.
And their division, out of the 3 5th Corps divisions, suffered the most casualties at Five Forks. Well over 300 casualties, I believe. So they were in it. Whether you think Crawford is to blame and he got lost, they were in it.
Right.
And the numbers don't lie.
Not like they were just sitting there playing on their phones.
Right. That's right. Well, the cell service wasn't too good anyway. So, again, he ends up not necessarily taking part in the surrender ceremonies that would occur a week later, but he's present, just like he was present at Sumter when the hostilities began. So he became one of only 2 Union officers that we know of present at both Fort Sumter and Appomattox.
Right, the beginning and the end.
The beginning and the end. Yeah, which is unique, to say the least.
Yeah, for sure.
So he will stay in the Army. When the volunteer Army is disbanded, those men are mustered out of service. He remains in the Army, in the regular Army. He will, again, continue to suffer the effects of malaria, and especially that thigh wound. It's just going to trouble him throughout his life. He commanded in the regular Army. He commanded the 16th Infantry until he resigned his commission towards the end of 1871. He went into full retirement in the regular Army at the rank of colonel of the 2nd United States Infantry. And his formal discharge was February 9th, 1873, after spending 23 years in the Army.
Right.
Okay. 1867, the year after he was discharged, he received an honorary law degree from the University of Pennsylvania. And his father, still kicking. His mother had already passed away, but Senior died June 7th of 1876 at Allendale. By this time, they had established a family burial plot in Philadelphia at Laurel Hill. And Senior was taken there and interred there. I might say that very near the Crawford plot, family plot, General Meade, his grave is located. And I think I said earlier, Crawford would attend Meade's funeral service there, and he probably visited his family while he was there. he went on to really try to promote the reserves and what they did here at Gettysburg. And in 1872, he purchased 47 acres. Did you have that slide?
No. 40, what? 40, what's the slide?
This one.
No, I don't have that one.
That one. The red.
Let's go to your camera here. Hold on a second. There we go. Camera. Yep.
The red is what he purchased, essentially Devil's Den right up Plum Run Valley. The blue is...
hold on. There we go. I'm sorry.
The blue is what the War Department had, and the other color, is it yellow? I can't tell from here. Down towards the bottom is what William Tipton owned.
Okay.
Crawford owned all that in red, 47 acres. I've seen accounts that it was 49 acres. Regardless, it was a fairly sizable tract of land.
Yeah. I wonder if, let me see. I wonder if there'd be a lake there now if
I don't know. There
was still in.
There may have been a very large pavilion.
Yeah. Well, right. And there certainly wouldn't have been a beaver dam.
No.
They wouldn't allow that.
Now, that would have been, well, some of that may have been on Tipton as well. But regardless, he had designs on building this big pavilion to honor as a memorial of the Pennsylvania Reserves. Of course, that was never built.
Tipton's gallery was down. Okay, I misplaced it in my head. So it's down closer to the intersection of Wheatfield Road.
Yeah, and you can see the Gettysburg Electric trolley line going right through there.
Yeah. Interesting. Oh, no. Wait, what am I? No. I'm sorry. I'm looking at it the wrong way. I'm looking at it's. Here we go. Okay.
Yeah,
no, Tipton's is exactly where I remember it, or thought it was.
You thought it was north.
Well, it was upside down.
Yeah.
Why do they have it that way?
You were holding it wrong.
No, I'm holding it according to the words on the page.
It is, and north is to the top on that map.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Okay.
What am I?
You're right.
Or say it like my wife. You're less wrong than you usually. Okay, so anyway, again, he spent much time promoting the efforts of the reserves, and in 1887, I mentioned this, he published The Genesis of the Civil War, Fort Sumter, 1860 to 61, about his experiences in Charleston and at Sumter. Again, I have that book. I have not read it for quite a while, so I should reread that.
Sounds interesting.
Samuel Wylie Crawford Jr. died November 3rd, 1892. Wow. Just 5 days prior to his birthday. He was born on November 8th. So apoplexy, rupture of the cerebral blood vessel. He died of a stroke.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
He was buried at the family gravesite. He never married, never had children. He was buried in the family plot at Laurel Hill Cemetery in Philadelphia. 2 years later, February 5th of 1894, John Agnew, his older brother, Margaret, his older sister, and his younger brother, Alex, transferred the Gettysburg land holdings to the United States government, who saw the park at the time.
Okay.
So that's when it got turned back over to parkland.
So they didn't want it?
No.
Yeah.
No, I don't believe they had.
I think it's better that way. I
do
cannot imagine a building down there.
Yeah.
Even if it is a memorial, I just...
And you never know if something had been built by this time, would it still be there?
Well,
who knows?
Wasn't it supposed to be this opulent thing out of stone?
It was supposed to be this big pavilion that was a memorial.
Yeah.
But, Crawford once said, hey, I don't need a memorial. The whole battlefield's my memorial.
He said that? I could have sworn that was somebody else.
That was Sickles. Yes, it was someone else. And finally, June 25th, 1988, his bronze portrait monument on the battlefield was dedicated.
Right.
Ron Tunison being the sculptor of that.
Yeah, that wasn't until the 80s. 1980s.
Yep.
Not 1880s, 1980s.
Yeah, that was one of the...
So that's a more modern monument.
Certainly is. I remember it well.
Do you?
Well, yeah.
It was before my time. It was always there as far as I knew.
Yeah.
Until I started doing the show.
So he's quite a hometown connection for me. When I bring people from Franklin County over here, we usually stop at that monument on a tour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, All right. So what we're going to do is take a break now, and we're going to come back with questions from our patrons over at patreon.com/addressinggettysburg. If you're watching as a first lieutenant and you want to call in and ask Tracy some questions, I'm going to put the phone lines up during the break, and we will see you when we get back on the other side right after these words.
When you're dragging ass out of bed, the hairs must up on your head. You picture the 20th Maine, and you're happy once again. Fight the battle against being slow with Little Ground Top Road.
This special episode is brought to you by our first coffee brand, Little Ground Top.
Trademark.
Roasted to perfection by our friends at Bantam Roasters. Take the high ground every morning with a piping hot cup of Addressing Gettysburg's Little Ground Top.
Trademark.
That features notes of cacao, wildflowers, and toasted sugar. I even taste a bit of black pepper in mine. You'll look forward to your cup of Addressing Gettysburg's Little Ground Top.
Trademark.
Every morning. So grab your multiple bags today at addressinggettysburg.com/cafe or drop into Bantam Roasters at 82 Steinware Avenue across from the Dobbin House during your next visit to Gettysburg. And hey, now that Little Round Top is open, imagine enjoying a thermos of Addressing Gettysburg's Little Ground Top while checking out the view from the hill. Outstanding. That's addressinggettysburg.com/cafe or Bantam Roasters at 82 Steinware Avenue. Civil War Trails is the world's largest open-air museum offering over 1,500 sites and stories for you to explore. Each Civil War Trails site has an interpretive sign to help fuel your imagination as you stand on remote mountaintop artillery positions, in fields where thundering cavalry charges took place, or in now quiet downtowns where raids, riots, or raiders shattered the peace. Over 60 Civil War Trail sites allow you to stand in the footsteps of the Gettysburg Campaign across Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, and of course, Pennsylvania. In fact, they are expanding further into Pennsylvania now with the latest sites in Wrightsville, Hanover, and Chambersburg. As you travel the trail, you'll find more than just great history. Beyond battlefields, great barbecue, beer, and bourbon await. Here's a pro tip: carry cash and never book your day completely to ensure that you can take that gravel road, explore that hiking trail, or pick up an amazing artifact from that awesome antique shop you find along the way. Request a free brochure shipped right to your door at civilwartrails.org, and be sure to snap a hashtag sign selfie next time you are out exploring. Click the link to Civil War Trails in our show notes. Follow Civil War Trails and create some history of your own. Our favorite bookstore in Gettysburg is For the Historian, located at 42 York Street. Isn't it, Eric?
You're darn tootin', Matt.
It's because they have the best selection of Civil War books in Gettysburg, both new and used, and online they have even more books to choose from.
But Matthew, what if the Civil War is simply not my thing?
Not a problem, my fine four-fendered friend. This is For the Historian, after all. They cover history from the ancient world to the 21st century with a strong selection of World War II and American Revolution books.
It's astounding how they squeeze thousands of titles from Osprey, Savas Beatty, UNC Press, and more into their store.
And it's also astounding how you and I both squeeze into our pants every day. Well, handsome, they have a warehouse too, and that's where they keep all those books that are available online at forthehistorian.com. And folks, if you go to forthehistorian.com now and order books until you're blue in the face, be sure you mention that you heard about them on Addressing Gettysburg in the Note to Seller box, and they will refund your shipping costs.
What if I prefer to browse in the store and don't want to go online to get my book?
Great question, Doodlebug. Just mention Addressing Gettysburg at checkout, and they'll take 20% off the retail price of your item. So go to forthehistorian.com, stop by 42 York Street, or call 717-685-5207. That's forthehistorian.com or 717-685-5207.
The Gettysburg Museum of History, located right here in the center of Gettysburg, PA. Owner and curator Eric Dorr grew up here and has spent his life collecting and preserving history through artifacts ranging from the Civil War, the Battle of Gettysburg, World War II, presidential items, pop culture, and more. His museum is free and open to visitors Wednesday through Sunday, 11 to 5 p.m., where you can stop by and immerse yourself in some of the most amazing artifacts that you would never believe exist in the middle of Gettysburg. If you're a fan of Band of Brothers and Everything Easy Company, you'll love his exhibit featuring the Dick Winters collection and artifacts from D-Day. You can even own your own piece of history by buying one of the many relics they have for sale in the museum and on the website GettysburgMuseumofHistory.com. The Gettysburg Museum of History is a non-profit 501c3 organization with a foundation that allows all purchases and donations to keep the museum operating and open free of charge. They have been featured on the History Channel, the Travel Channel, the Smithsonian Channel, and the Science Channel. Now you can check them out on American Artifact, the series on the YouTube channel, The History Underground. And on a personal note, I'd like to thank the Gettysburg Museum of History for being a sponsor of Addressing Gettysburg by providing the studio that we recently moved to and do all of our shows from. So that's the Gettysburg Museum of History at 219 Baltimore Street or the GettysburgMuseumofHistory.com.
You're listening to the Addressing Gettysburg podcast with Matt Callery.
All right, and we are back now with Tracy Baer, licensed battlefield guide extraordinaire, and we are talking about Samuel Crawford. We're getting our questions now from our patrons over at patreon.com/addressinggettysburg. Any level of Patreon can submit questions. However, the real gold is in the second or first lieutenant level. Second lieutenants get all the episodes that we put out on Patreon, and the first lieutenants get to watch future episodes being recorded like this one here. And here we go. Our first question is from William Segrist. He says, my great-great-grandfather was part of McCandless's brigade that led the charge. My question is, who would have given the orders to McCandless to charge down Little Round Top? If it was Crawford, was he displeased with the results of McCandless's and Nevin's brigades' advances that he seized the division colors and led another charge?
I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think it's just a matter of spontaneity.
Yeah.
Honestly,
I feel like that's what it was, too.
And as far as who gave the order, we discussed that. I mean, that's coming down. Crawford didn't take it upon himself. It came from somewhere, and that was most likely Sykes.
Right, because his previous order would have been hold the position.
Hold the position, that's right.
So in order to unhold it.
And he was, I believe, we can check on this, I believe he was just given orders to support the battery up there, too.
Right. Naptown Bob, he says, I had heard that sometime after the battle that Crawford had asked a Confederate general to write that he was the, quote, actual hero of Gettysburg, but this officer refused. Is there any truth to this? Have you ever heard that? I've never heard that.
Well, I think that goes back to Crawford really trying to upplay the role.
His role or his men's role?
His men's role. I don't know that I ever heard him say, I'm the true hero, but I don't think he downplayed it if somebody...
Maybe he was trying to say that the reserves were the true hero.
Yeah. I don't know that I certainly don't agree with it, but I can't confirm nor deny because I've never heard that, but I think it was more him really trying to get notoriety for his men.
Richard Snyder says, did Crawford ever explain through correspondence or post-war writings why he chose to leave the medical field to command troops? Also, did he ever write to defend G.K. Warren regarding the Battle of Five Forks?
Well, we discussed that a little bit. He sat in on the hearings and he spoke in favor of Warren, and what happened, he didn't, again, Warren didn't point the finger at him, and he didn't certainly badmouth Warren in any way either. What was the first part?
First part was, did he ever explain through correspondence or post-war writings why he chose to leave the medical field to command troops?
Not in as many words. I think it was, it may have been, again, it may have been like the nation itself would soon be feeling, you know, that patriotism and...
Like, I have to do more.
Yeah. It could very well have been that.
But a surgeon, I mean, it's not like a surgeon's not doing anything. He's doing quite a bit.
That's right. And it could have been a sense of adventure as much as anything. I can't say that I saw anything firsthand, but I've never read all of the Crawford papers, all these letters and things he wrote extensively to his sister Margaret, his older sister Margaret. And again, probably to John as well, because John was such a mentor to him. But I can't say that I can recall this is why I'm doing it.
Right. Grant O'Brien, he says, 1, do you think Crawford was a big part of Warren getting fired in 64? We kind of covered that, but yes or no?
I don't. I think it was a part of it from a very limited view, and that limited view of Sheridan not knowing exactly what Warren was doing.
Right.
I think that ended up being a part of it. Do I think it should have happened? Do I think Warren, what was the famous quote Sheridan said? You weren't in the fight. You're not in the fight. Something like that about Warren. And he truly was. He truly was. So that's kind of a yes and no question. I think it became part of the rationale of Sheridan, but I don't think it was accurate.
It's not like he was at a shad bake or anything.
No, that's right.
His second question is, did the famous cartoon Coyote get his name from Crawford's middle name?
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, Grant.
Spelled differently.
Yeah, God.
Let's hope not. Crawford had a few accidents with the trees falling on him and a spent bullet, but none of the things that Crawford had with him, the artillery or anything like that, said Acme on them.
No, and when the Confederates painted a tunnel on a mountainside, Crawford did an accident, stupidly go through it and then just smashed right into his face.
Right.
Okay, that was a poorly executed joke there. Jim Lutch says, did Crawford give the Union local... Oh, sorry, let's start that again. Did Crawford give the Union Army local information? Also, why not? I guess he knows the answer. Well, along with other local soldiers from the area. Oh, okay. Also,
because he's from Franklin County.
Yeah.
Not that I'm aware of.
Right.
Not that I'm aware of, because he spent more time on the other side of the mountain than this one. And how familiar he was with the south side of Gettysburg, I don't know. Certainly.
And by the time he got up here, the battle lines were pretty much drawn.
Yeah, but men under him were from Gettysburg. Company K,
correct.
30. They were from Gettysburg, so I would have been relying on them a little bit more than Crawford.
Right, exactly.
But I mean, did they go to Crawford and say, "Hey, my home's right up the street. I know that." I don't know. That's one of those things. It will remain a mystery, perhaps. But Crawford, to my knowledge, no.
That's the thing with history. It is full of mysteries.
It is.
They should make a show called History's Mysteries.
History's Mysteries.
I think they did already.
You could market that thing.
Yeah, they already did it back in the 90s.
So, are there any callers?
We do have a caller. We have Alfred on the phone. Alfred? Alfred, are you there?
Matt.
Yes, hello. Grant. This is Grant.
Grant.
He likes to give fake names, but it tells me who
I was going to
is.
say, to the bat phone.
I know who he is. All right, Grant, what's going on?
Not much. Thank you for another very good show, Matt.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Yeah,
Tracy,
thanks for that.
Tracy.
I just sat here while Tracy talked the whole time.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. You were rudely interrupted.
That's what Tracy did an excellent. Matt, you do what you do well. Sit and listen. But Tracy, thank you very much for a great show. But like any questions that we could possibly come up with were covered. Six questions said that in the chat as well. And he knows obviously a ton more than I do. But I have one question I wondered. Do you think there's no other person other than Crawford who was there at Sumter and was there at Lee's surrender at the end? Is there anyone else that could have been there?
Yeah, Truman Seymour. He was one of the officers at Sumter, and he ended up being
Seymour.
Yep. So there were at least two of them.
Now, Grant is from Australia.
Well, pretty rare company.
Oh, really?
Yes. Can you tell?
I thought it was French accent.
No. He's one of our international listeners.
Oh, my God.
Are you in Australia now?
I don't surrender that easily.
He is in Australia now.
Yeah. What time is it in Australia right now?
About 2:30.
2:30
in the morning.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah.
What a dedicated! Thank you for that. That's
he has
awesome.
nothing to do with his life.
Yeah, you have no life,
no,
huh?
He has no life.
That's awesome.
Yeah. You want to hear a song about Grant?
Oh no.
No, I'm not. This is a serious show, Matt. You know that.
Oh no.
Watching a dressing Gettysburg. He picks up the phone. Here's a dial tone.
Did you do this one on that?
Dials and gets down to his work. Tra la 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 la.
Oh gosh.
Grant makes fun of Matt. Tra la 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 la. Calls him bald and fat. He tries to make Matt cry, but he never wins. 'Cause Matt's an awesome guy.
All right, whoa. All right, we don't need all those songs. All right, Grant, anything else you got there, Grant?
Grant, you have made it big time. You have a song about you on AG. Wow.
Yes, I'm very honored, of course. Matt is also privileged to have me as a listener, so you got that.
Yeah, it's a two-way street. It's a two-way street.
I don't know about that awesome guy part, but we'll go with that.
We'll go with it.
Well, I have to make myself win in the end, Grant. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And especially that we both know you cry, so
That's true, Grant. That is true. I cry often because I'm 45 and apparently my estrogen levels are higher than my testosterone levels used to be. So I cry at Hallmark commercials.
Well, that's obvious.
Yes.
That's obvious to us all.
It is, I know. Grant, thank you very much for the call, sir.
Thank you.
Sir.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, have a good one. We do have one more caller here. And this is, will you get off the phone already, Grant? Jeez. And this is someone who, of course, we all know and love. And in fact, just today, his Spotlight On interview dropped.
Hi, Mike Lentz.
6 questions, Lentz. Hey, Mikey.
I was listening to that on the way over here. I was sharing with Matt.
Mike? Oh. What? He hung up. Oh, no. Wait, hold on a second. Hold on. Sorry. I might have hung up on him by accident here. Mike, are you there? Hello, Mike. Mikey.
Want to come back to him?
Hello, are you there? Am I here?
Yes. You're there now. Sorry, did I hang up on you or did you hang up?
Yeah, you said you are now on the air. Beep,
oh,
beep,
I'm sorry.
beep. I'm like,
I was trying to get rid of Grant.
So, Mike, I was listening to your episode on the way over here today. That's awesome. Matt and I really want to party with you in Las Vegas sometime.
See, that's why you have to become a patron, folks, because you get stories like that. What does that mean? What is that joke about? Well, you're just going to have to be a patron and find out.
We're not going to give it away.
No, we're not.
That's a teaser.
That's right. It's privileged information. Mike, what do you got to share with us?
Yeah, I have a question about the Crawford statue. One of the things I heard was that one of the stipulations on the battlefield was that division commanders were on foot while Corps and Army commanders were on horse. Is that a myth or is that actually a park stipulation?
That I don't know, but I have also heard what I mentioned earlier is it costs a hell of a lot more money to sculpt a horse than it does just a man.
Yeah.
Well, and then also there's the old myth about the number of legs off the ground of the horse and what happened to the general,
and about the tails of the horse. As well.
I didn't hear what's the tails.
So if you look at an equestrian statue and the horse's tail is lowered, is down, it's ready to charge. But if it's up, it's ready to discharge, and you want to be out of the way.
Oh God, I didn't. That's a great one.
On that note,
I thought I heard all the horse jokes.
That'll be on the guide exam, I'm sure.
I bet. Well, there's the old one, which is what is it? All 4 legs on the ground. He came out unscathed. Yeah. Mm-hmm. 1 up, he was wounded. 2 up, he was killed. 4 up, he was in the Air Force.
He was in the Air Force.
Yeah, that's the other old dad joke.
Or it was a unicorn.
Or it was a unicorn.
It was a unicorn.
Right.
So, Mike.
Yeah, Mike.
Mike, what's number 2? Do you only have
That's it.
one?
That's all,
it. So, there
you
is
were so thorough.
there is
got
some
one.
symbolism in that monument. If you look at the flag carefully, you'll see represented 34 holes in the flag representing the 34 states.
Interesting.
And because West Virginia would join, there's a hole that goes clear through the flag. So you look at both sides and count both sides.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's only one that goes clean through.
That's my understanding.
The rest are representations of a hole.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Craters.
Craters. There you
Mini
go.
ball craters.
Yeah. Anything else, Michael?
It was a Kevlar flag.
No, that's all.
That's all. Well, thank you very much, Mike, for your continued support and the phone call, and we'll talk to you later. Mike had some good things in the comments. Actually, there were some good comments as we were going along here. Let's see.
And I do want to share this question Dave sent me this morning then.
Okay, go ahead.
So, Dave Bussier,
excuse me. I'm sorry. You threw me off.
Dave B. sent me an email this morning. So I got up, let the dogs out, fed them, checked my emails, priorities. Okay. This email had Dave confused. It says, here, I'm going to read it. This has nothing to do with Samuel Crawford, but here goes. And this is from a listener. Tracy, are you red and white or blue and gold? And I saw that and I read it and I just cracked up.
Okay. Now that you have to be really into Pennsylvania sports.
So no, you have to be Chambersburg.
Oh, Chambersburg.
So that's a Chambersburg High School reference.
Oh,
so
okay.
Apparently Susan, who had sent that email and asked that question, must be a Chambersburg alum.
Yeah.
So the school colors, blue and white, but one of those things for school spirit, class spirit.
Right.
The classes are assigned colors depending on graduation of, or in a year that is an even number or an odd number.
Okay.
And
sounds very complicated.
Yeah, it is. So this is really, throughout, I mean, you're red and white or blue and gold, as she mentioned there, she asked. But one day a year, usually in the spring, and I don't know when this is going to air, but today is May 6th. And Color Day, when you show this school spirit, this class spirit by wearing these colors, was last week.
Oh, okay.
And in Chambersburg. And I don't know if this is unique to Chambersburg or not. I have no idea.
I've never heard of that.
I've lived in a shelter, The only thing good about Chambersburg is you'd go there and turn left to go to Hagerstown.
Right. Well, yeah, when we were red and gray, I think were our colors.
Well, the school colors were blue and white.
Okay.
At the high school. So if you are,
but we didn't do anything with like graduation year.
So the graduating year, again, in reference to an even number is red and white. An odd number year is blue and gold. Okay. So Color Day, and I don't know what it's like now. When I was in high school in the mid to late 70s,
it was in black and white.
It was in black and white. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, one of the big events, unsanctioned by the school district, was decorating your car and driving around water ballooning and egging other people's cars.
We did the decorating the car. We didn't really do the water ballooning and egging. Yeah. But those were a different time.
But then
the 70s.
During Color Day, it would be, an abbreviated day, and then you'd have the school-wide assembly. Again, when I was doing it, we would do it in the gym, and there'd just be those ridiculous games. You'd put your head on a ball bat and spin around, that kind of thing. So back then, it was just 10, 11, 12th grade. So, somebody was always outnumbered. Right. So to answer Susan's question, I graduated in 79, so I was the best of colors, blue and gold.
Blue and gold. There you go. Real quick, a couple things here in the comment section that I think should be shared here is Loafhauser says, or Loafhauser, which is Grant. He's got these silly names. He says, "I wonder
like
if
Bart Simpson." Isn't he?
He is the Australian Bart Simpson." He says, "I wonder if there were any other doctors who made the transition to fighting." And 6 questions jumps right in, and he says, "More than you would expect, Loafhauser." Even at Gettysburg, Jerome Robertson, commander of the Texas Brigade, was also a physician. He was known for taking care of his men.
Interesting.
Later on, Mike, 6 questions, Lentz says, "What I know of Chambersburg history is because of Tracy. His Chambersburg tour is awesome." So there you go. You can always try to get a hold of Tracy to book him for a tour through the show, or you can call the guide office. What's the guide office's number? Because that would be that's another thing I should say is that, you can get a guide in a pinch. Sometimes people are like, "I'm coming to town tomorrow. I'd like to book, X." Well,
we like to be at least a week out,
right? Well, that's what I say.
It's difficult to get day of or next.
Of course, day. and so that I'm like, I could maybe put you in touch with a guide, but you're asking for a specific guide. I guarantee you, tomorrow's Saturday, she's not available.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
But here, I could give them the number to the guide office, and then they can get somebody. So what is the number to the guide office?
This is the Association of Licensed Battlefield Guides office on Steinway Avenue. Understand, it is not, we don't have somebody there answering the phone 24/7.
So you're going to have to leave a message.
You leave a message, and then that evening, a guide will come in, transcribe all those voicemails, and start assigning tours. So the guide office phone number is, 717-337-1709.
And then if you really do need someone in a pinch, obviously that's not your answer. We're not your answer. But the visitor center would be the answer.
Yeah, and the Heritage Center really.
Oh, the Heritage Center too.
Yeah, they asked for a lot of. I just got like 10 tour requests through the Heritage.
Like last minute, though? I'm talking
today
about
so far.
Okay.
And some of them are for within the next day or two.
Okay, good. So that's what you could do. Heritage Center, Visitor Center, if you need a guide today or tomorrow. And if you have time, which is really what you should do, is give people some warning.
Yeah.
You can either contact us, Matt at addressinggettysburg.com, or you can call the number that Tracy gave to the Association of Licensed Battlefield Guide Office. This is a very long show, ladies and gentlemen. I have another one to record in an hour, and I got to eat lunch. So I got to get going. Thank you very much, Tracy. Thank you, First Lieutenants, for watching, participating in the comments, and calling in. And thank you for our other patrons for sending the questions in writing. And thank all of you for listening. We'll see you over on Patreon, won't we? Just kidding. I know you're not going to join. Anyway, we'll see you next time.
Whether you're a history enthusiast, reenactor, or someone seeking a unique piece of the past, the Badge Maker has something for everyone and anyone. Don't miss out on owning a piece of history. Shop now at CivilWarCorpsBadges.com and elevate your connection to the Civil War era. That's CivilWarCorpsBadges.com. Thanks for listening.
Our hearts so stout have got us famed, for soon 'tis known from whence we came. Wherever we go, they dread the name of Gary Owen in glory. Instead of spa, we'll drink down